on this, you're just deranged. That maybe you're trying to pander to destiny. I don't know. So here's another example.
Well, what can I do for you?
Well, I mean, I think it's fair for me to call in after calling you a North Korea. I mean, of course, that's hyperbole, but I do think you were propagandizing on that thread in two respects. In one, trying to defend a disgraceful apologetics session by Destiny for Atrocities, and two, you seem to be presenting it as an open question whether the blockade was, of course, no, was punitive in nature, and also creating a false dichotomy that it had to be either punitive or concerned with national security. Of course, Israel didn't want weapons to go into Gaza, so that's easy. But you seem to be kind of blurring the lines, and I just didn't think it was intellectually honest. But maybe I was being unfair. We'll see.
I think I explicitly rejected the false dichotomy in the introduction of the thread. No, I said that the problem is that some people will just think it all has to be security based. Like there has to be a security reason, even if it's cookies, which is ridiculous. But then the other is that people only seem to want to talk about the punitive stuff because as if the weapon stuff doesn't exist. I thought that was my position.
Well,
I
you
never
seem to
denied that it was punitive. I think I actually said, like, what was it? They either wanted, it's undeniable that they wanted, that some of them wanted the Gazans to suffer or just didn't care. I feel like this just
well,
got ignored.
the
That's
language
I
you
don't know.
used. Sure, the language you used uh, in one tweet in particular I'm looking at now, some parts of Gaza's blockade might well have been punitive. It seems to be characterizing this as an open question, whereas it's not, as you seem to be conceding now.
Yeah, you take it out of context and it might be, but like I'm trying to think. There are ways that you can say like, hmm. Let's say someone, fuck. Let's see. I'm trying to think of an example of doing this. Let's say a guy is caught cheating on his girlfriend, and she's like, "You you cheated on me at that fucking party last night at that person's house," and he's like, "No, I didn't. I actually did it at the beach." And she's like, "You might well have done it at the beach, but you cheated on me." It's like, well, she's not really saying that you didn't do it at the beach. She's saying that, like, yeah, you can concede that. That's why I mentioned it like more than once in this thread that you can say that, yeah, the blockade was absolutely like informed by punitive measures, at least in some degree. That's why people said what they said multiple times, different people. But it's
I
not
mean,
taking away from the
there's a
fact that it was the
number of
weapons. So yeah.
Okay, so I think we're in. You think I misunderstood you? I think the thread was in effect. I mean, also you're defending Destiny, whose position was clearly uh, attempting to obscure any punitive element to the blockade with his ridiculous cookie hypothetical. And
Um,
you're saying Omar was being. You said Omar was being. Like Omar and Grimm were not. Here's why another why. I mean, it's not that interesting whether I'm misrepresenting you or whether you were misleading, as I think you were. But you called Grimm and Omar dishonest, and I don't understand why, given the argument was simply that the blockade was punitive, that you think they're dishonest if you agree with that position, because they never have said there's no security element to it.
so one at a time. I think I said Destiny looked silly responding to a claim about cookies by talking about sugar and rockets. It seemed he started with the assumption that there had to be a security justification for any blockaded item and just dug it in from there. That seems like I even said at the beginning, there's a propaganda game, and I think both Destiny and Omar were guilty of it because Omar might not have said there's definitely nothing to do with weapons, but it's just interesting that all he wanted to talk about was cookies. They kept saying, "What did the blockade? Why did the blockade happen?" And it's like, "Oh, I think it's because if they're doing cookies, it's clearly not a security issue or something." I think he literally said that, and it feels like maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like if you had only ever asked Omar about the blockade and not anyone else, you would, well, first of all, you'd probably think the cookie ban was still there because he talked about it, but you also just wouldn't know about the weapons. You wouldn't know that that was like the first ever blacklist that ever appeared from the blockade was in 2008 when they passed that defense whatever act about specifically banning weapons and dual use items. That was the first
Mm-hmm.
ever actual this particular item on paper. We will say don't do that. So uh, yeah, no, I think it's fair to call out both ends of that because if you don't acknowledge the
But
security
they're
element, or
not.
if you
They're
struggle
not.
to, that's an issue. Yeah.
Oh, but you're misrepresenting their position. Grimm does not, and Omar do not deny that there was a security element to the blockade.
It's like pulling teeth getting it out from them.
I mean, it's obvious there was. Of course, Israel doesn't want weapons to be imported. Of course,
But why
the
can't people
whole
just say
point
that
is that
then?
the whole point is that they're not only doing this, which we agree other states would do, but and then there's another point I have in this regard with your tweet, but it's not just that. The relevant issue is that they were blockading food until 2010. They were prohibiting all exports from Gaza virtually until 2015, and still severely restricting it afterwards. They're trying to make Gaza poor and miserable. It wasn't just weapons, because the salient issue is not weapons, because most people are not going to find that objectionable. The salient issue is the food blockade that was in place for 2007 to 2010, and the prohibition on exports, obvious attempts to make Gaza poorer, which you seem to acknowledge now.
You're saying that
Yeah,
Israel
and
needs.
as I always have, I think even in my first reaction to this debate was me saying that, yeah, it's like there's usually two reasons: it's punitive and it's security. Yeah, like I said that in my reaction to the debate, I said it in my thread. I've never not said that. I mean, we can try and find the clip of Omar being asked about the blockade and why it was there, and he just talks about cookies. It's like, I don't know. We can find
Yeah,
the clip
whatever.
if you want, but I don't know. I feel like it's
I,
pretty.
you think I was
Like,
misrepresenting you? I think you were misrepresenting Omar and Ryan. We can. It's not that interesting. We can move on. I think.
okay.
But I understand your position now. Maybe it has always been that the blockade was. I mean, I don't know why you're using might well here. It sounds weird weasel words, but regardless, you admit it was punitive. I mean, if I were to say, Stalin might have killed the Poles at Katyn. I mean, it just is a strange language to describe like an acknowledged, established atrocity. But whatever.
Yeah, if you say that with no other context and you take it out of context of the thread, yeah, it would look like that. But it's in the thread where there's clear mention of punitive action multiple times. So it's like, is what it is.
All right, fair. You think I'm taking other comments? I'll reread the thread, and if I come to that conclusion, I'll certainly tweet that out. Maybe it's certainly possible, but I definitely think, and this may have set me astray, that you simply were misrepresenting Omar and Ryan. They wanted to focus on the outrageous issue, not the and Destiny wanted to focus on the security issue, but they weren't denying there was a security issue, right? That's a different thing. So they weren't being dishonest. They just wanted to focus on the more outrageous part. Okay, here's another thing, and this is like Prague or you in a tweet you said. The fact is, any country on earth in those circumstances would do something similar, and if that part can't be acknowledged, the conversation goes nowhere. Okay, that's like Dennis Prager tier stuff. So what is obviously it's a kind of factual. So I can't know you're wrong, you can't know you're right, right? That's so like little logical throat clearing there, obviously. But what is your like historical or political basis for this speculation, right? And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. It's a kind of factual, so it has to be speculative. But what is your basis for that?
I just think if there's an area where an organization that has quite a lot of control over that area is importing weapons to attack you with it, you're going to want to restrict their imports of weapons and dual use items because that's what they use to make their weapons.
Sure, but we've agreed that there was a punitive food blockade. We've agreed that there was a punitive prohibition virtual on exports. You think Sweden would do that if they had faced the same level of threat from a neighbor that Israel did in 2007?
I mean, if you put Swedes in that historical context for a number of decades, then yeah, they probably would. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay, that historical. I mean, if you put anyone in any historical context, you're going to get very different behavior. But
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Anyone
regard,
in those circumstances.
well,
Yeah.
that's not a meaningful statement. That I mean, because it's almost circular. But
Not
the point is,
really. Some states would do much worse, like much more. Like, what did the Saudis do to Yemen? Right? They blockaded so hard that there was a fucking famine. You know, at least I think that's what how it went.
right? Okay, um, so you're just making that assertion. You don't have. It's just like an intuition pump, essentially. You don't have historical evidence based on the state of Swedish society today, the state of every society in the world today, that their political values would be You think that the political values of any society facing this kind of threat would be compatible with the blockade on food in an attempt to impoverish the population, which we've agreed already was part of the blockade policy, given the prohibition on exports, which makes no sense from a security perspective, total prohibition virtual.
So, I mean, I mentioned countries that would do it worse. I don't know exactly your I don't know what you're referring to there when I say, like, how do I know what Sweden would have done in that context? I mean, I feel like when countries get aggressed upon, they tend to get pretty regressive pretty quickly. They tend to get pretty like vigilant when it comes to that kind of stuff. No, uh, I don't think
Okay,
it's
well,
like
so
I don't think
you
it's
don't
like a
have any.
massive like guess.
All right. Okay, so you don't have any like specific argument. It's just a speculation. Okay,
Could
continue.
you say that Sweden wouldn't do that in Israel circumstances?
Look, I don't believe that the political values of Swedes are, if they face this very, very, very vanishingly small statistical risk that civilians in Israel faced in 2007, I believe they would engage in border security. I think a blockade would be entirely possible, but I don't believe they would attempt to deprive the population of food to punish them. No. I
Well,
mean,
to
this is
be clear, when
speculation.
we're talking
Kind of
about
possible
attempting to
to
deprive them of food, I don't really know. Like, do you have any polling on how much of the population actually supported that idea? Because it seemed to be that the not allowing of food came, like, the public announcement, as far as I remember, was they don't want weapons to go in. And then the way that they implement the policy is, first of all, they claim to have done it out of simplicity with the whitelisting because they have their list of exporters and suppliers and countries that they trust, and then they keep everything else off. And then even before 2007 to 2010, even before the flotilla incident, they start gradually introducing goods in. Now, it seems like 100% the case that they were slow to reintroduce all those extra goods because they wanted to put pressure on Hamas. But how many people were actually behind that decision and whether or not that was like the basic cultural values of the country, I don't know.
Well, I mean, we can talk about the cultural values of the country a bit. There was a poll from Pew way back in 2014, 2015. I'll just DM you a link really quick talking about it. This wasn't about the blockade, but it was about ethnic cleansing of Arabs from Israel. So we're talking not just Palestinian, not just Gazans, not just West Bankers, not just people who identify as Palestinian, but Arab Israelis as well, who
Mm-hmm.
might not. And nearly 50% of Israeli Jews said they favored that. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't seem to me that they're adverse to highly punitive, crime against humanity, would be the classification of ethnic cleansing measures. It seems like a lot of the public was supportive of that even before October 7th, for example. So
Mm-hmm.
I just think you're making a mistake if you're inferring some kind of liberal political culture in Israel.
What do you mean, liberal political culture compared to what? Like, there's not many countries that
Compared,
are
we're
in
talking
Israel
about Sweden.
circumstances. Yeah, but I don't know
Okay,
why it's so difficult to understand that with like Denmark and Sweden have not faced anywhere near the same kind of threats and existential issues that Israel has like for what like centuries. So like since well I guess since the Nazis, but like yeah, I don't know why you would get that comparison.
I
It's
mean,
just it's such a
if you look at
strange.
the October 7th, they're just statistically speaking, the risk of a terrorist attack to Israel, if you look at go over many years, first intifada, second intifada, other incidents, and so on, is vanishingly small. I mean, it's not a practically significant risk. It'd be much more, being an Uber driver would be much more risky. So, yeah.
I don't really know if that's how it works when you know that there are measures you can take to try and reduce those risks though. Like if you're living in Israel and you know about terror attacks and second intifada and rockets going over your head all the time, like I'm sorry that the psychological impact of living under that, even if it's like, oh, on paper it's not that much more dangerous than what Uber driving or whatever, like that's not really gonna cut it.
Okay, so because of a salience bias, that you think any culture would become this or more liberal than Israel.
I mean, you're in America right now, like the country that torched half of the Middle East because of 9/11. Yeah, I
Okay,
think so.
so let's talk
I
about
think
that
liberal
for a second.
democracies would actually be yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
let's talk about that for a second. So, in the United States, let's take Afghanistan for example. In 20 years in Afghanistan, the United States killed far fewer civilians than Israel's killed in 7 months.
9/11 was one attack, one day of terror attacks on a country that is the most powerful military on earth, the biggest economy on earth. They have the Atlantic Ocean on one side, they have the Pacific Ocean on the other side. They've got not that much threat from Canada at the top and Mexico from the south. I'm saying what they did in reaction to one terror attack, right? Without all the border issues and border threats and ideological like rhetoric that comes from these countries surrounding them and like Iran and all that. Like, yeah, that I'm not using it as a one to one.
we were
I'm just
way
saying that
less. We were
America
way
went
less.
fucking ballistic because of one terror attack. They were
We
like,
were way
everyone's
less.
like, the majority supported the Iraq War, even though the
Yeah.
evidence that Saddam was even involved in 9/11 was like never really taken that seriously. Yeah. So you
Okay,
put
but
America in that situation every day, or like for 75 years, then yeah, of course they're probably going to be.
they had 9/11 every day in Israel. Okay,
I didn't
we're
say.
really in
I'm
the.
talking about that situation. Wait, there's no way you thought I just said that that Israel gets a 9/11 every day. You did not think I just said that.
Yeah, I kind of did. Yeah.
Okay. Um, do you consider yourself a good judge of character?
Um, I think decent, but not exceptional.
Okay. I think there's room for improvement. I'm talking about that situation, the situation that Israel's in. Yeah.
Okay. Um, well, you wouldn't dispute. I mean, are you one of these people who memes that every civilian killed in Iraq was killed by the U.S. and therefore we're worse than Israel, or do you accept that the U.S. in Afghanistan and Iraq, if you look at the rate of civilians killed, and even overall for Afghanistan, likely for Iraq, overall civilians killed by the U.S. was way lower in Afghanistan and probably lower in Iraq, maybe not, maybe not. I mean, they're different estimates than Israel's killed in 7 months. So we're talking in Iraq, also decades of war, right? There's people on the pro-Israel side. You found the pro-Palestinian side, and I admit they lie about things, but
Mm.
the pro-Israel side, like this guy John Spencer and Coleman Hughes, and their approach is to lie about how many civilians the U.S. has killed. So, like the Battle of Mosul, for example, they attribute thousands of civilians killed by ISIS to those killed by the U.S. to make us look worse than Israel because they want to defend Israel for some reason. Yeah, I mean, your comparisons aren't good because the practical level of dehumanizing rhetoric we engaged in with in terms of leadership of the country, right, like Bush and his cabinet, and also the level of brutality the U.S. military engaged in is just incomparable to what the IDF is doing. Now,
Yeah,
you're
because
right,
their
though.
situations
No,
are
no,
not
you're
comparable.
right
Yeah.
that we launched a completely unjust war, yeah, in Iraq. That's completely correct.
Yeah, and
And in
that's
a sense,
because of one
we
attack.
have
Yeah, I'm talking, and
okay.
also talking about the sentiment of the population, because we know what happened not only in the United States but also all over Europe. We know what happened to the rise of Islamophobia and all these far right populist parties that used to only get like 3% of the vote, moving up to 20, and these like Islamophobic deport all the brown people parties. And it didn't take much for them to go in that position. France has like the Bataclan, and then Le Pen just starts storming the polls. Yeah, like it doesn't. And the UK, we had 7-7, and now like the BNP suddenly got like a bit of a windfall, and then even besides that, you've got like the rise of UKIP and all these anti-immigration parties and like Brexit and stuff like that. I feel like it doesn't take much to push a otherwise liberal population down that path,
I mean,
and
otherwise
that's what
liberal.
all I'm saying, right?
The other day I showed you data for example, sex trafficking, which was systematic in Israel, like not punished essentially until we threatened to sanction them. This is a story in Haaretz this 2001. It's much better now. I'm not denying it isn't better, but this is an expression of illiberalism. It's more like it's the reaction to this problem of complacency and acceptance and so on was much more akin to what you'd expect from a third world country than a Western liberal democracy. And in point of fact, one of the ways that Israel managed to stigmatize sex trafficking, there's a literature on this, is by characterizing it as a problem of non-Jewish immigration. That may sound outrageous to you, but there's an academic literature on this. So no, it's not a liberal society. We just should have a clear-eyed view of what this society is. I'm not trying to vilify it. I'm saying that people like Destiny and you apparently are giving the world a vastly distorted view of this country's commitment to the law-bound conflict, commitment to human rights. It's a liberal democracy, essentially.
Um, Again, it just depends on what we're comparing it to. I feel like whether like the liberal values of a country is pretty much is kind of on a spectrum, isn't it? Like I don't think like yeah, of course Israel is less liberal than what the UK or Germany or the United States or Scandinavian countries, but compared to like their neighbors, compared to Iran, then it's like a liberal beacon. It just depends, right?
I mean, sure, you can compare it to Iran, but my point is that we have a distorted view of what Israel is. It isn't a country that takes human rights seriously for non-citizens. It isn't a country that, if you're talking about migrant workers, for example, it isn't a country that takes, or people in occupied territories, it isn't a country that takes the law of armed combat seriously. We can talk about that if you wish.
Mm-hmm.
And we should just be clear-eyed about that. Now, maybe your argument is, oh, we'd be as bad in those circumstances. I'm not sure we would in terms of treatment of migrant workers and sex trafficking in terms of the history, but okay, maybe we'd be as bad on security. But it doesn't really matter. We need to have a clear-eyed view of what they are as a country before we fund them unconditionally. And we have a distorted view. Now, I actually agree with you that there's more of a liberal political culture there
Mhm.
than in many of than the neighboring countries, really, generally. But we have a vastly distorted view of where they rank in the human rights and liberalism spectrum, and there's a bunch of propagandistic reasons for this. But you seem to unfortunately share that distortion, and we can talk about the law of armed conflict as well. And this pertains to your defenses of destiny, like the Great March of Return, and again, I understand using, like when I said North Korea propaganda, obviously that's rhetoric and hyperbole. It's not literally saying you're as bad as someone propagandizing for Kim Jong Un. But I don't say that out of no research. I don't say that out of no conviction, just to be silly. I really believe that you are propagandizing by defending Destiny's takes, and certainly Destiny, for atrocities, mass murder. And I think I can defend that if you want to talk about the Great March of Return, for example.
Out of
And I think
interest,
this.
I'm looking
Mhm.
at the Organized Global Crime Index right now for ranking countries in terms of human trafficking. I've got obviously top would be like Afghanistan, Eritrea, Yemen, etc. Israel is like around the same level as like Germany, France, but also Jordan for human
Okay, the
trafficking.
U.S.
Or
No. So again, I was talking about sex trafficking in 2001. I clearly demarcated that.
okay,
Now, in terms of the level of, I'm not sure how this index works. The United States ranks Israel right now in tier two. That's the same as Saudi Arabia, the same as UAE. There are different indices that define this differently, to be sure. There's some that Israel might do well on. The point I made was historical.
hmm
And then there's another point with migrant workers. There was a study by Human Rights Watch in 2015. And I'm, by the way, Saudi Arabia treats migrant workers terribly. So I'm not saying they're good on this. Obviously, they're horrible. But there was a report by Human Rights Watch in 2015 that showed a large groups of Thai migrant workers were studied, and almost all these folks were being swindled. They were being paid less than minimum wage. They were being overworked above maximum hours. I'm going to Google this right now, actually. Thai migrant workers, Human Rights Watch. And they're living in squalor. They didn't have pay slips. So no, it's just in a liberal. Again, they're not the only country with these problems. Certainly not in the region. My God, and also not in the world, right? So it's not like Israel is uniquely evil in this regard. It's just this is not something that I believe Americans would do. It's not something French would do. I mean, of course they would do it, but not systematically like this, right? So yeah, now you can find some indices. I don't know if that. You could also relate to volume of people, like citizens are relevant too, are citizens being trafficked, but the history is the history, right? The 2001 history I talked about where the U.S. threatened to sanction them because of sex trafficking being systematic. Like I mentioned, it's much better now, right? In that regard, I mentioned that clearly. But the problems continue in terms of these Thai workers, for example. I'll just read from the report now. In fact, the Israeli Supreme Court, one of its better institutions, has described the system they use as kind of binding people to a specific sector. And but that is one of the most liberal institutions they have, their Supreme Court, by the way.
hmm
Said this is akin to a modern day version of slavery, and it still applies to the domestic care sector there. But find this way. Yeah, but yeah, read this report on the Thai workers. Like they're all being swindled, basically. We're not
okay.
talking about like a high. So that to me is a mark of an illiberal society, right? And I don't believe that would happen in the United States. I'm not saying it wouldn't happen. I'm saying it wouldn't happen at a systematic level, right? So again, it's not to vilify. Like Japan has a problem with this. I'm very concerned about Japan. We're going to have a big influx of folks from Nigeria. I'm concerned about that because they have an issue with this. They may not have a high rate because they have so few migrant workers right now, but they have an issue with this, right? So it's not Israel is uniquely evil. It is that Israel is not what we think it is, and we need to make adjustments accordingly. That is the argument.
I don't really know. Maybe in the conservative, like Christian sphere, there are people who think that Israel is just like about as liberal as the United States or a European country. I don't think I've ever tried to make that claim. I think it all exists in a spectrum. Yeah, of course there is, like, it's not like any,
Well,
it's not like you expect a liberal democracy to be occupying another piece of land and expanding settlements into it. It's not like you expect a
right.
liberal country to do a nation state law. It's not like you expect like the massive surge in the like Orthodox population and the amount of protections and privileges they're given. So yeah, of course there are places where you can make these criticisms, and of course it depends on, like, they are still in different circumstances, which I think contributes to it. But yeah, I don't really know.
Okay,
I'm
I'm
not
going to
sure
quote
what you're
this. Let
pushing
me
back
say,
against. Yeah, I don't, but
so
I don't think it.
contrary to
I just
law,
don't use the binary of like liberal versus not liberal. I feel like, yeah, there are some countries that exist
no, I
somewhere in the
think I think
middle.
that's
Yeah.
I think that's appropriate. You can say Saudi Arabia is not a liberal democracy. You can say Israel's not a liberal democracy. I think
No,
it's
because
highly
that just makes them sound like the same level. Like, I think Israel's markedly different from Saudi Arabia when it comes to levels of liberalism. No.
no, no, yeah, but they're
Yeah.
not a
Okay.
liberal democracy. Hungary is markedly different than Saudi Arabia in levels of liberalism. Russia is as well. Like there is more grassroots. Lebanon is where your father's from. Lebanon has more liberal ideas than Saudi Arabia, but it doesn't mean Lebanon
I
is
mean,
liberal. I think
Lebanon, where
actually
you have
Lebanon.
like two armies, and one of them is like non-government, and one
Okay,
of them is supported and backed by a theocracy and is bigger than the national
right.
army. And where, like,
I
yeah,
think
they'll have elections, but like for the, like, I think for like from the recession up until 2020, their government was like barely functioning for half of that time. Like they didn't really have
okay,
a
sure.
government,
But
like no
they
traffic
do
lights on the
have
roads and
elections.
shit. Yeah,
Not
but
rigged. Okay, there. Well, that's a weird issue. That's not a. Lebanon is not a liberal society, obviously, and we can talk about some of the problems we just talked about with Israel for Lebanon, certainly. But my point is, they have elections that are not rigged. You can protest in Lebanon. There are protests.
mhm.
People are allowed to protest. So you wouldn't, but it would be a big exaggeration for that to say Lebanon is a liberal democracy. And I say that Israel, despite being much more prosperous and functional, is much more analogous to Lebanon than a Western democracy. Um, yeah.
Out of interest, maybe I actually don't know this. You can tell me. Like I know in, like in the Israeli Knesset, you've got to the point where they have like Arab Knesset members who at various points have like made statements in support of Hezbollah during the occupation of Lebanon before 2000. You've had like, and it's not like, it feels like a lot of the criticism that people take from Israel, even the far leftists, is they get it from Israeli sources. They get it from like Haaretz or from B'Tselem or from Standing Together, or like internal critique is a very common thing in Israel. Not to mention like the declassification of documents and all that, like for transparency. It's not like, I don't really know, does Lebanon do that or?
Well, you're talking about no. So there are some definitely some elements where Israel is is more liberal. But if you're talking about like rights for citizens, I don't think that's very, including Arab. I don't think that's a very compelling example. Like um, i- i- states tend to protect the rights of their citizens. Like like Afro Saudis. Black Saudi citizens have rights that you couldn't infer from that. Therefore, Saudi Arabia is liberal and treats black migrant workers well. So I don't think allowing free speech to citizens, which Lebanon does as well, incidentally, is a compelling.
Yeah, but is there like a B'Tselem organization that's allowed, like equivalent, that's allowed to criticize
Israel
Hezbollah's
threatened.
rights record
Israel
in?
threatened. Israel threatened. Israel threatened to. Israel's defense minister threatened to prosecute B'Tselem for saying that in the Great March of Return, Israel shouldn't shoot unarmed civilians.
And B'Tselem still exists, and they still came out and they called Israel an apartheid government state. Yeah, so what? Again, you're comparing again, like you understand what you just did there, right? I was
There
asking
is a
you if there's any
there's an
equivalent of
NGO that
human
functions
rights
in Lebanon.
organizations that are in Lebanon that like repeatedly criticize the actions of Hezbollah and their treatment of locals or people in Syria or whatever else. I'm just
There is a
asking you.
human rights organization in Lebanon that operates lawfully and vilifies. It's called This Is Lebanon. Vilifies the country's laws regarding the treatment of migrant workers, and they're not shut down by the state. So, I mean, with Hezbollah, it's a different kettle of fish because they're like an armed group. But regardless, you can like pick at little analogies here. I think uh, the Israel Lebanon analogy is much better than the Israel United States or Israel Sweden analogy. If you look at the issues we've talked about, they do have democracy, they have free speech for citizens, but if you're not a citizen, you're in occupied territories, you're a migrant, you're fucked. I think the analogy is better. We might not agree
I
on
mean, it's
that,
just
but
that you used an example of like a minister threatening to go after B'Tselem because of the Great March of Return, whereas like in Lebanon, you've got like a case in where there's like a critic of Hezbollah who got murdered and shit. And there was like a, yeah, Okay.
Well, what about the the CLDH, right?
Nope.
Okay, the Lebanese Center for Human Rights criticizes the state all the time and denounces human rights violations, and they're not shut down.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think it's a better Lebanon is a better analogy than, and I think if we saw Israel as Lebanon, we'd have more informed policies. The other thing I think is I mean, it's an interesting case because citizens have rights in Israel, right? You mentioned these guys who are Arab Israelis and are you know same with Hezbollah. They have rights, right? No question. But people in Lebanon with extreme views have rights too if they're citizens. Like the key thing with a liberal democracy versus an illiberal democracy, I think, is does this extend to the rest of the world to any extent, right? Of course, every country treats citizens better, but like in the law of armed conflict, do they follow the law of armed conflict? No, Israel does not. Do they
Okay.
treat migrant workers with basic fairness and swindle them? No, Israel does not. It's do they the occupied territories you mentioned they're colonizing, right? They torture. That's very different than liberal democracies. The United States, of course, engaged in torture after the September 11th, but generally speaking, and what distinguishes one distinguishing feature from liberal democracies and other countries is the use of torture, and it's systematic in Israel, and that's the difference in the occupied territories, right? I'm not
Okay,
talking
so
about
yeah, I
Israeli.
know, yeah, I know where you're at. And so, so personally, I think how liberal a country is. Some countries are clearly not, like whether it's China or like fucking Iran or whatever. But then some are probably more in a more of a gray area. Like I would say Poland, Hungary. I'd say Israel's in there as well. Um, yeah, I think it's okay to put Israel in like on the spectrum of liberal countries, albeit very flawed. I'm okay with that. You seem to think it doesn't count as liberalism at all. That's fine.
I
Uh,
think it's better to think of it as like Lebanon or Turkey, maybe. It's not the level of protection of seriousness about adherence to international norms in Poland is not comparable to Israel. I mean,
I'm sure it depends on which you're talking about. Like, I'm sure for like gay rights, it probably swings quite hard in favor of Israel versus Lebanon and Turkey,
well, I
but
mean,
yeah, or
homosexuality
Lebanon
is
anyway.
there are countries. I don't think you think Thailand is a has an amazing human rights record, or the Philippines does, and they have tolerance for homosexuality. So I don't think that's a very availing example.
Well, that's why you
But
have to use it. Like, that's why it's a complex issue. But yeah, um,
regardless, we don't agree on. Let's go. Okay, this is a general disagreement. I think Israel is better seen as like a Lebanon or a Turkey for human rights. Probably worse actually because of the occupation and so on. But I think that's the best categorization. You seem to think it should be a liberal. We should see it as a liberal democracy. I've given examples. We don't agree. We can move on. I think.
mhm.
Okay. So do you think Israel as a military generally follows the law of armed conflict? Like has a serious commitment to that?
um,
I'm not saying that they don't commit like if that you could commit war crimes and still have some seriousness to commitment to that, right? So I'm not saying one war crime would mean they don't, but as a general practice in say the Gaza wars, the Great March of Return, do you think that they have shown a serious commitment to the law of armed conflict?
um, with my layman's understanding of laws of armed conflict, I think they do it better than most given the circumstances. Maybe not as good as NATO countries, but
Okay.
yeah, generally, I think as much, yeah,
Okay.
there's room for improvement, but yeah.
Okay. Can we talk about okay? See now that's where the North Korea stuff comes in.
Okay.
Because yeah, that's just apologetics. This military is engages in massacres, and this is before. And I'm going to give you specific examples. So, uh, catch your breath for a sec, grab a drink. Like, just give me 2 minutes. I know. I hope I don't get too boring, but I'm going to talk about the Great March of Return a bit. And I actually think, as a sane person who I assume isn't a sociopath, you'll agree that this is essentially massacre, mass murder. That isn't hyperbole. Okay, so the Great March of Return. You're familiar with the outline of it, I imagine. I'll just tell your audience briefly. A gentleman, a 34-year-old Palestinian journalist, came up with the idea for a nonviolent march. A committee was held, and they articulated a commitment to principle of nonviolence, but also they wanted to approach the fence to walk toward the fence. That was a key element of this exercise, right? And at the very beginning of the march, so we're talking about March 2018 now, the involvement of Hamas was extremely marginal. Moreover, some of the incidents that your buddy Destiny talks about, like the what is it called again? These kites that were set on fire. This did not happen until April, right? So On May 30th, which was the big first event of the Great March of Return, you had tens of thousands of people there. They were civilians picnicking and so forth, right? And what happened? I'm going to grab some examples as to what happened. Just a second. And I'm going to give you the circumstances in which these people were shot. And then I want you to tell me whether you think Israel is a military that adheres to the laws of armed conflict seriously. Okay, I think this is it. Yes, here we go. Okay, here's an example. Mohammed Obeid, okay? This fellow, okay. He was a footballer. He took his telephone out. He walked toward the fence. He's about 150 meters away, unarmed. He took his phone out and began to record, right? Now, after he started recording with his cell phone, an IDF sniper shot him in the right side of his right leg. So he was shot over this in both legs. And he's disabled for life because of that. So that's one example. Now, you could think, oh, that's a one-off, weird things happen in war. Okay. Here's another guy, Yusuf Krones, unarmed 19-year-old, attending the demonstration on 30 March. Again, this is before the incendiary kites that Destiny talks about.
Sorry, one second. I can just fast forward this whole thing. I don't really have like a, as far as I know about the March of Return, is I think the IDF like completely overreacted. I think they were probably expecting a lot more than what they got.
Overreacted. This is a massacre.
No, I don't think it was a massacre. No.
Okay, it's not a massacre. So what would you call this incident?
So I typically consider massacres is what happens after people have surrendered, not when there is actually like a level of conflict happening.
Would you consider it to be murder?
Don't know.
Okay. Let's go through more examples, though, please, because there are quite a few. They're quite a large number. Okay, a 41-year-old.
Yeah, but you realize you just claiming these like incidents like in isolation like is not really going to add anything to this conversation. Like you realize that because you're treating it like it's just like this one person and then this one person on the other side, if you use them all in isolation. But the problem is that the context of the Great March of Return is that you have a national conflict happening in an armistice line with a buffer zone, with two de facto governments and militaries on each side.
All right.
Like, I don't really know why.
Let's talk about another case of your liberal democracy. A 16-year-old schoolboy. He walked within.
Okay, so you're not going to engage with anything I said. Okay.
No, I'm not. He was distributing sandwiches to demonstrators, unarmed. The IDF shot him in the face. So that's justified because of the armed conflict. Like you're basically at the point. You guys are condoning this monstrous fucking military. The U.S. Marines would not do this. They wouldn't. I'm sorry. I'm not being chauvinistic. No, we would not do this. Here's another example. 25-year-old mechanic. This is all of March 30th, by the way, one day. Naji, this fellow Naji, shot in the abdomen, 5 p.m. March 30th. Died the same day. 300 meters away from the separation fence, unarmed. They were just murdering them. Now, the goal may not have been to murder Palestinians. It may have been to disperse this march, but they were essentially murdering people. And by the way, Hamas, which was involved in the march, was very, very marginal at the beginning. So this is 30 March. I'm using that for a reason.
Yeah, I never denied that Hamas weren't marginal. Yeah,
they were very marginal at the beginning of the March of Return in terms of their presence at this. It wasn't developed by them. And their presence was extremely small. These people were not Hamas.
Yeah, but I think the problem is that there were militants there, and there were like people trying to get through the border fence. Isn't that the issue?
So you can shoot a 17-year-old handing out onions. There's another one who was handing out onions.
Okay, just out of here's a question. Just so we can actually engage in some like I want to just ask you a question, just so we can actually like try to analyze the situation. Do you think a group of people trying to break through the Gazan border fence between Gaza and Israel, setting fires on the other side, et cetera, do you think that is analogous to say like a Mexican teenager trying to cross the American border? Do you think these are analogous situations?
You're being ridiculous.
Why can't you answer that question? That's a very easy question to answer, by the way, because. So do you think these are analogous situations? That's analogous.
They may not be analogous perfectly, but they're both.
Or even a
These were
group
unarmed.
of like 100
These were
Mexicans
unarmed
trying to cross
people who
the
were
US
not there.
border. Let's say
It's
100
honestly
Mexicans
close.
try to cross the US
Pretty
border.
close.
Do you think that's
Pretty
analogous
close.
to the 100
Pretty
people at
close.
the buffer zone trying to break through the border
Pretty close.
fence? Yeah?
They weren't trying to break through the border fence. They were not. Some people did. These people did not.
There was a
This guy was standing 300 meters away. The plan of the march, the plan of the march, the plan of the march
Mhm.
was, and they expressly described this. They got more radical as they got massacred. Surprisingly, wow. The plan of the march was to walk toward the fence, but not to go through it. They did not plan to go through it. Now, some people this changes. This became more radical, but the reason I'm using March 2018 examples, and you're just defending atrocities.
Yeah, it changes when people try to break through the fence.
Is important to you, but just massacring these people is okay. All right, I'm going to give another example. Again, shot in the same day, led to amputation. I'm going to give this.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
17-year-old Muhammad, unarmed, 300 meters away from the fence, handing out onions and water, was shot in the leg, and his leg had to be amputated. I mean, these people have no seriousness. So the United Nations suggested that this was a crime against humanity, Israel's conduct in the UN investigation, and the reason for that is because it is mass murder, right? It's like Hamas on October 7th is a crime against humanity because they intentionally killed civilians, and same with Israel. They shot over 6,000 people just in 2018 alone. The United Nations found that one was justified under the laws of armed conflict.
Yeah, because they treated it as a policing
no,
incident.
You're wrong.
Yes.
You're wrong. I bet $10,000. You're wrong. That's it. You're getting that from Destiny.
Does it not say in the
No.
Does it not say in the
Yes,
report?
they do both. They do both. Destiny Wikipedia it or read it too quickly. They did both. They did both analyses.
What was the other analysis?
It was international human rights law.
Can you show me
They
that?
did IHL. Yes. You haven't read this, dude.
No, I haven't. I didn't say I've read it. I've just read bits of it, so you can show me.
Yes, they use international humanitarian law, which is the law of armed conflict, and they call it they say it's likely a crime against humanity, which is a term related to war. Like Destiny's completely wrong about this, as are you.
There might be. Might have a look at it. Who knows?
No, you are completely wrong on this.
I am just saying though. Why did you find it so hard to say that this was analogous to 100 people trying to get across the American border from Mexico?
Because it might be different, but it's totally it's still mass murder. Yeah, it might be scarier, but it's still mass murder. It might be riskier. It still is mass murder. These are civilians.
No, what riskier? In what sense?
Dude, like just defend this or don't. Like.
By the way, IHL is IHL the same as laws of armed conflict? They overlap, but not necessarily.
Are you really going to make this semantical point to try to get out of the fact that
that's not semantic? Those are different legal categories. Again, I told you my opinion. I told you my opinion of the Great March of Return was that I thought the IDF response was insanely disproportionate to the threat, probably because they expected more. I've told you that, but you're acting like it was a massacre, as if like this threat was trivial. I'm saying it's not trivial. The people were trying to break through the border fence, and I think after October 7th. Now that we know what happens when that border fence is breached, that's probably a reason to be quite jumpy, no?
Okay, post hoc, we're going to engage in post hoc reasoning.
What do you mean post hoc? Do you think the IDF had no reason to be like, it's actually pretty dangerous if this border fence gets broken through, right?
No, I don't think you can shoot women and children who are 300 meters away from a fence handing out sandwiches.
Yeah, no, I don't think they should. That's why I make the case that I thought the IDF response was atrocious in the Great March of Return. But you're calling it a massacre. You realize that there's a difference. You realize that it doesn't have to be a massacre to be bad, right?
It was many massacres. It's a massacre. Look, you shouldn't use hyperbole, right? But this was a massacre. They were shooting unarmed civilians who posed no threat, who were hundreds of meters away from the fence. So here's an example.
Were the majority of the people who got, I know you think that just one more, you realize the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, right? You can't just keep on giving one individual case at a time. Were the majority of the people who were shot in the buffer zone, or were they outside of the buffer zone? The one that everyone understood to be a buffer zone.
I don't have that statistic. They posed no threat.
Because most of them were in the buffer zone, right? You know full well most of them were in the buffer zone. It's an armistice line. You understand that the Gaza border is not just a border, it's an armistice line.
Yeah.
In the context of a national conflict.
Yeah, because you can just massacre civilians under your understanding of IHL in a buffer zone. Okay.
I mean, you can use the loaded language if you want. I'll put it this way, like personally, maybe I just have a hawkish opinion on this both ways. I think, you know, how, like there were a bunch of Jews living in Gaza before 1929. They had to get evacuated because of the riots. You know that
Hmm.
story? If their descendants decided to start marching on the Gaza wall to do a little march of return to get their homes back from people living in Gaza, and the Hamas authorities saw them at the wall and just shot them for trying to get through, I think they're probably in their rights to do that in that context. Like
Okay.
it's an armistice line. You're not
Uh-huh.
supposed to run like to go into the buffer
Yeah,
zone of an armistice
what you're
line.
supposed to do if I mean, it's unbelievable that you guys are like the type of people who like trans youth sports and it's okay to massacre civilians. Okay, but why not use like water cannons, skunk water? There are other ways to disperse a rally or a riot, whatever you want to call it, than massacring people.
Yeah, why not? That's why I said the IDF overreacted. The fact that I think they put,
Overreacted.
it
Yeah.
seemed to be that let me finish my sentence. It seems to be that that they expected more than they were getting because, like you said, Hamas were not actually very present there. Yeah, the fact that they were using live rounds on people who did have even like a reasonable amount of range in terms of immediate threat. Yeah, that's my critique of the IDF in the Great
Okay.
March of Return.
So
I just don't think
here's
it
an
was a
example.
massacre. You
Here's an
realize? Can you
example.
acknowledge that a thing
Yeah,
can
I
be
was not.
can be bad but not be a massacre, right?
Course, but this was a
Thank you.
massacre. This
Cool.
was a crime against humanity.
Okay.
Their legal analysis was that this is a crime against humanity, and the reason they said it. So first of all, like you're just defending this. First of all, you haven't read. I actually thought you were smarter because I watched some of your videos. I watched your video on Haifa, and then I'm like,
Yeah.
was it Haifa? Yeah, no, you talk about Haifa, and I'm like, okay, no, he actually has read Benny Morris. He's a reasonable view of the Nakba and so on.
Mm.
But no, but on this, you're just deranged. Maybe you're trying to pander to destiny. I don't know. So here's another example. A
Okay.
16-year-old girl, she actually got 50 feet from the teenage girl got 50 feet from the separation fence. I mean, these IDF guys are brave,
Yeah, it's almost
really
as if
brave.
when you've got like a riot at the border in the
She
middle of an
planted
armistice
a
line, in the middle of
fence.
a national conflict, then yeah,
Uh-huh,
people get situations
yeah.
get quite chaotic.
Okay.
Do you think if the girl
So
was
she
there, like,
planted a
okay,
flag.
hmm?
She planted a flag 50 meters away from the fence and stood facing the IDF soldiers.
Okay,
And then she does something really scary. She draws her finger across her throat.
hmm,
Wow, I mean that I gotta say, a teenage girl. If I have a gun, I'm murdering her at that
sorry,
point.
do you want me to
Um,
substitute myself with imaginary LonerBox who thinks it's okay to kill a teenage girl who makes a gesture at the IDF?
no, that's what you want to fund. You want to fund these people, and this was a peaceful. They were so if you unless you're for the occupation,
No way,
why
I'm
is
just
this a
saying,
bad
like,
concept?
why did you say it in that way? Do you want me to go and get like imaginary IDF box who actually
I'm
thinks it's
saying
a good thing to kill people who do that?
I'm saying that shooting her, she didn't die, I don't believe, but shooting her was a work.
If that's your interpretation, like, yeah, sure, why not? Like, do you think I disagree with
Why
that?
not? But I'm saying they kept doing this. Is not the reason I'm reading all of these isn't for dramatic effect. It's to show you that like they did this over and over again. It wasn't like one off. This was systematic.
When you
They
say
had
when you say over and over again and systematic, like yeah, it happened. And would you admit? Okay, do you think this was like were they just lined up against a wall, or is this like a chaotic situation?
it's a chaotic situation, and their rules of engagement are so insanely loose that it resulted in effectively a massacre. Yeah, I don't think the plan was let's go kill. It clearly wasn't, right? We agree. There was no plan to
Hmm.
kill Palestinian civilians, but because
No.
the rules of engagement allowed any threat, like a 16-year-old girl planting a flag. Ooh, and was this person prosecuted? No, they're never prosecuted by the idea. People
Hmm.
who do this ever, virtually never. That they're justifying murder. Murder doesn't have to be premeditated. I don't deny. I don't say this was premeditated murder, but it was murder. You know. And this is the military you and Destiny want to fund. I think is like Liberal Democracy Day or whatever.
Um,
Um,
so if you're saying again, like that would mean that even if they're not planning it, that would still come under recklessness, which would count as war crime.
yeah, right.
Crime against humanity. You're saying that poetically, right? That's not like
No,
IHL
no, no.
ruling.
They accuse AHL because uh, if your rules of engagement are such that you're allowing your soldiers to murder people, right?
The,
Which is what they were,
no,
then
crime
that
against
is
humanity is when you
systematic.
intentionally target civilians. No.
It, the legal lines are fuzzy, but
They're not.
you're no,
It's an attack
no,
directed at a civilian
no,
population is a
no,
crime against humanity.
no,
It's like one of
no.
the worst crimes that you can possibly commit. It's like next door to
And they were
genocide.
accused, and the UN said this is a this likely constitutes crimes against humanity. The conduct of that. If you are saying it doesn't matter what your motive is. If you are sanctioning murder as a state through your rules of engagement, that can constitute crime against humanity. So if I say, for example, like, let's say you're my soldier, and I say, and there's, I have 1,000 soldiers, and I tell my soldiers, okay, if anyone looks askance at you, shoot them, and then they shoot them. That would be a crime against humanity, even though I'm not saying you shoot, go out looking to kill people. I think you're conflating massacre with crime against humanity. Of killing.
No, I'm not. That's my understanding of crime against humanity.
Intentionality is not a simple debate question. If you have an extremely loose rules of engagement that allows murder, then as a matter of policy, and your soldiers in fact murder pursuant to that, as they did in the Great March of Return, then you can be accused of crimes against humanity. It's legal semantics. But the UN report, which you haven't read and Destiny hasn't read, he didn't understand the most foundational. He's argued this in 2 debates and didn't even know they were applying both IHL and international human rights law. They were looking at both paradigms, right? Because obviously you could debate whether this is armed conflict or not. And you repeated this. You got this from Destiny. I mean, my God, I under over your series.
I also read. No, I'm sorry.
Destiny.
I read the passages that were in
No, you
the
got it from Destiny.
and that were put on Twitter. People said that. So you're talking about like laws of armed conflict, right?
They applied. Yeah, they did an IHL analysis. They did not just do police. So you got that from Destiny, and it's bullshit. Yeah.
Okay.
So you should be embarrassed by that. And you're also like,
Why are
it's a
you being
weird
so combative
half-hour-
with me?
Because I look, I am being combative because I care about the issue, and I think you're doing something bad. And I want you to change because you have a platform. That's why. I'm not. I don't hate you or anything like that.
Even though my position on the Great March of Return is different from Destiny's, I don't think it was an understandable. Like, I don't think it was like these shootings were justified. You understand that? I don't know how many times I have to say that. I just don't think it was a massacre. That's all I'm saying.
But you've moved. Okay, I'm glad you've moved toward that. That is a more reasonable debate.
Well, I haven't moved towards that. That's always been my position. I can find you clips from my old content if
they
you
were
want.
overreacting. You've changed over the course of this conversation on this, but we can.
No, that's. Do you think an overreaction is like justified?
That's you use very tame language at the beginning, and now you're using harsher language. But that's good. It's progress. So,
I mean, if you want to pretend that you've changed me on something, go ahead, sure. All right.
You don't care if I've changed you. I just want your position to change. I mean, like this was mass. You can okay. So let's leave aside massacre, whether you change, because these are kind of petty things. Like maybe the more relevant.
It's not petty because you got really angry at me saying it was an overreaction.
Yeah, because well, first of all, you said they didn't apply. No, when I said that they found war crimes were committed, you said they didn't apply international. No, they did. So you were defending it in some weird provisional way. Anyway, um, uh, so and also they imply the UN report implies it was murder. So they're talking about crimes against humanity, and they say murder and other inhumane acts that cause great suffering or serious. And of course, they're being, circumspect with their language because this is something the ICC would have to find, right? They're not saying this happened, but they're saying murder and other inhumane acts that cause great suffering or serious injury qualify as such violations. The commission found serious.
I think the report said something. Serious human rights violations were committed, which may account to crimes against humanity. I don't think they ever made a conclusion about that. So
no, well, they can't make a conclusion about it because they're not the ICC.
Did they not conclude that these were violations of IHL?
Yeah, they did.
So what do you mean? They can make their decision. They can make an opinion. They can do that without the ICC. What the fuck do you say that for?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think that's
okay.
That's a fair point. But so the crime against humanity case they think is more debatable, and the war crimes case is not. Systematic war crimes is not. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean that seems to be the best reading. So yeah, you might be. I think that's a fair point that they'd want more investigation before deciding whether this is a crime against humanity. But they raise the issue. They clearly do. They say this may constitute it. Right?
And I guess we have a different interpretation of what massacre means. I think massacre typically has to involve like either people are like the threat is like completely gone, like there's just no aggression from one side, or like I usually understand massacre is what happens after people surrender or after the fighting is stopped, not mid-fight. But I don't know.
I mean,
generally,
you can massacre people. Soldiers can massacre people if there's no fight. It's just people who are not engaged in hostilities. But
okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so do you, having talked about this report to some extent, do you have any pause giving arming unconditionally a military that engaged in this conduct?
I don't believe in unconditional arming. No.
Okay. I mean, you don't need me to read about the 11-year-old they shot, right?
What
That was
I don't know
riding.
if like the conditions of whether or not you arm someone should be based on if one person gets shot. What?
No, I mean, there are there are multiple 11-year-olds, but 13,
Okay,
14.
but it sounded like you had one example there that was going to change the entire position on whether or not you support a
I mean, I'm
country.
being
Like,
sarcastic. I'm being
okay,
sarcastic, but they just like, they just massacred people.
okay. Um,
Yeah.
no, I don't believe in unconditional arming. I think it's actually a good thing that America is not sending munitions, well, so far, because of the Rafah attack. So,
Okay. Um, here's one question. So on the Great March of Return, how
hmm.
severe, just more normatively, like scale 1 to 10, I know it's kind of a silly thing to say, but how serious do you consider these kind of violations, which I've talked about?
I might have to read more about it.
Okay. So all right, we can read more about it now. So there's a girl, 14-year-old girl
No, that's not what
who
I count reading
no,
about it. I don't count reading about
no,
it as you just in
no,
my own time. I can get
you
back to
haven't
you on
read
it.
it. You haven't read it. A 14-year-old girl
I just
cut
said I
through.
need to read more about it. What are you
Directly.
doing? I don't want you to just like
No, I'm going
lecture
to
me
read an
on these like
example of it.
case
No,
examples.
we're gonna read a
No,
few
you
more.
realize you sitting there saying a 10-year-old was shot because they waved at the IDF, and then next
Yeah,
one, a 14-year-old ran up and threw a stone the size of a fucking grape, and then they got shot.
no.
That's not how I assess a
Okay.
situation. I'm sorry. Like,
Well, these are all data points, so you should assess situation this way. But a 14-year-old girl approached the fence with wire cutters. There were warning shots fired. Okay, ooh, that's the IDF's justification, and then they killed her as she continued to cut the fence. A 14-year-old kid, eighth grader, I think.
okay.
So, I mean, this is murder, is it not?
Um, I'm just gonna wait
If
till
it's
you
as
move
I
on to the next
describe it,
topic. I think I've said like 3 times now. I'd like to read more about it in my own time, but you're just continuing.
read the full UN
All
report.
right,
Like, please
I'll
do.
start right now.
You-
Okay.
Okay, you can just engage in ha 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 debate bro stuff. But
What do you
you
think
guys are
you've been
just
doing?
no. I've been reading you cases of people they shot and seriously injured. Like I'm
After
reading
I
you
said
cases
how many times that I'd rather just read the report instead of just
as the
have you
cases
choose your favorite bits to me?
as the cases accumulate. 11-year-old who yelled slogans at the IDF, unarmed shot in the head. Yeah,
PDF.
I mean this was a massacre, but you can justify.
Page
I mean,
1 out of 251. Submitted as a supplement to A/HRC/40/74. This text sets out the detailed findings of the Independent International Commission of Inquiry.
all right,
Have you
all right,
stopped?
all right, all
Okay.
right.
Anything else? What any of the you want to talk about violations of laws of armed conflict? Any of the wars, maybe, or
Yeah, we can talk about the wars. So you haven't read, but just to get your point on the Great March of Return, you haven't read much about that. Is that
I think
correct?
if we even rewind this VOD, I said that I didn't have like a very strong take on like whether or not it was completely justified or not. Like it seems to
Okay,
be that it was a pretty
let's put
insane
okay. You don't
situation.
have a very strong take whether okay. Um, so here's my point. So Destiny justified this on the debate and falsely said that they only analyze this as a police control event. So do you think that that is does that show seriousness of purpose on his part that he in 2 debates talked about this without having clearly read the report because they're doing IHL analysis throughout in addition to the police analysis?
Yeah, it's not the first time if that's the case, it's not the first time I've seen Destiny make a mistake. I mean, that's when I saw Ryan Grimm posting screenshots of this thing. That's why I thought I saw as well. So I don't know, but
Okay.
yeah. Do you think I've never
All right.
like pointed out mistakes that Destiny's made in analysis?
I mean, let's talk about let's talk about the Destiny thing really quick. Then we can talk a little bit more about.
Well,
Uh,
actually, no, I'd rather we just speak about different issues. I mean, you can use me as a proxy to fight with Destiny if you want, but like, yeah, you can just talk to me rather.
Yeah, I mean, I basically, well, it's a criticism of you because I think you're because you are capable. I will give you actually it's a criticism in some sense because you are capable of reading. We all have biases, right? I'm not saying you don't or I don't, but you are capable. I've watched a couple of your videos. You are capable of reading a text, of discerning important points, of engaging in analysis, and teasing out extremist polemical views that don't make any sense and coming to reasonable conclusions. And given that, I think you're more culpable in the sense for apologizing for Destiny's ridiculous propaganda and lies and so on And you're probably doing it for views or something. I don't know, but it's
Okay,
not
I'm just going to
ethical.
say very quickly, and then we can move on. I think in this, since the beginning of this conflict, I think I've probably effectively pushed back on claims that Destiny has made that I thought were wrong more than just about anyone else, because like it seems to be that whenever I bring a lot of these issues to him, it seems like I've looked into it enough that he typically moves off of it. Like I feel like I've been doing this since before October 7th. So
Okay.
maybe you didn't notice that. Maybe you've just been unaware, but it's fine. I even
Okay.
did
So
it in
here's
the
an
thread that
example.
you brought up at the start of this conversation, just so you know. But anyway,
Okay. Will you correct him on? I mentioned this too. I
so
think I
you wanted
DM'd
to
you.
talk about the wars.
No, no,
Uh,
we'll talk about that in a second. Just one more point on this, and we'll go to the war. I promise. Okay.
hmm.
So here's another example of this. The other day, Destiny tweeted 300 IDF soldiers were injured and a few were killed in the Great March of Return. Utterly false. 0 were killed in the Great March of Return. 1 was killed in the vicinity. About 4 were injured. So just citing bogus data. Okay, maybe he made a mistake. Wikipedia may have been wrong. He was corrected multiple times and left the tweet up. So that's an example of dishonesty. And I pointed that to you, I believe, and you didn't do anything about it. So
Oh, I had to mute you on Twitter because you added me like 3 or 4 times in one day. I just got kind of exhausted. But I'm pretty sure what the 300, because I think misreading the 300 IDF injured as 300 IDF injuries was the point, right?
no, no, there was not
I'm pretty sure I
300.
saw that on his subreddit, because what usually happens, if you really want to talk about Destiny, is when I see him making errors, I'll usually notice it after watching a VOD the day after. I will pick it out, I'll find out the counterclaim, and by the time I've come onto his stream or mentioned it, he's already found out because someone in the Reddit did it anyway. So it's like,
Uh-huh.
I feel like the pushback is there. Obviously, it's less likely to be heard if it comes from like you, but it's there. So I don't know.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. So the other thing I'll just say really quick. I'm sorry, I lied. I do just one more. This will be the last. This one I promise. Real promise. But like he's lying about the plausible thing. Like I understand we were wrong about that. People were wrong about that. I believe the president of the court or whatever. I
Mm.
don't know the title. But he was wrong about it too. He tried to in the debate. He accepted the premise that they said genocide was plausible and tried to merely argue plausibility doesn't mean anything. So he's going around saying, "Oh, Finkelstein was wrong, Moyne was wrong, haha," and he was wrong in exactly the same factual way. So it's just dishonest, you know.
Okay. Um, do you agree that plausibility is a low standard?
No, you're changing the subject. He was wrong that like he is saying people are full of shit because they got it wrong. I got this wrong too, right? I
Do you
believe the
agree that
president's
plausibility
word.
is a low standard, though?
You're changing the subject.
No, I'm just asking you that question just by the by, because it seems to be
Yeah,
people don't
it's
agree with
not,
that.
it's not operative
Hmm?
because the woman said the lady who's in the president, I believe her over my reading of the case, right? So she said that that wasn't found, and Destiny's going around saying, "Ha ha ha, everyone was wrong," and he made the same mistake. You understand what I'm saying? If you want to be bad faith and change another subject, you can.
Maybe he made the same mistake. Yeah, it sounds like. I don't
But
know
why
the
is he
exact situation,
pretending
but
that it was unique to like Finkelstein and Moyne? Yeah, so
well,
it's
what
just dishonest.
everyone's saying
But it's all
plausible
saying you were
genocide as if
wrong.
that's like a
You were wrong.
huge thing.
Yeah, but it didn't. The point is, we mistakenly thought the conclusion was drawn to this effect, and it was not.
Well, I
Right?
didn't. I never made that mistake.
Yeah.
Everyone else's
Well, you
problem.
didn't. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Do you agree that plausibility
Okay.
is a low standard?
It doesn't matter because
Just by
it's
the
not.
by, it's just like I'm just changing. It's just like we're moving on. Just a separate question.
I don't. I don't even know. I mean, it's.
Okay.
I don't. It's not relevant because it's not an operative concept anymore because that was a misunderstanding of the case currently.
Okay.
Okay. All right. When I talk about just first give me your so give me your take on the current so-called war. So you supported it initially. Uh, have you? What has been your position? Actually, just because I don't know all of your positions on this, so just give me a few minutes or a couple of minutes and explain to me what your position has been on this since October 7th, because I want to be able to actually engage it, right?
TLDR, I think Israel has a right to go to war with Hamas. There are definitely measures they've taken that I absolutely don't agree with and think are pretty atrocious. Um, yeah, that's more or less where I am. I don't agree with the incursion into Rafah just because there are so many people there. They don't seem to have anywhere to go. I have no idea what the alternative is, but it's just me being queasy, I guess. But Yeah, and it seems to be my experience of looking at these wars, like whether it's this one or past ones, is like it does seem to be that excesses happen. I think that's like 100% the case, that there are violations and that there are war crimes, etc. I feel like they are almost always made out to be a million times worse than they actually are, but they're still there. So you know.
Yeah. So just a, so your point was kind of abstract. So you support one could support the war, but oppose in theory, but not support the war in practice. Have you supported the war in practice or no?
Parts of it,
Like
but
you,
not all of it. Like I can tell you the
okay,
specifics. Like I don't support Gallant and those dickheads like turning the water off. Like that's obviously fucking insane. Um,
okay,
I don't support the. I feel like I could be wrong, but I feel like the speed that they went all the way through down to Khan Yunis was more of a political decision than a military protect civilians decision. I think they did it because they knew that international approval was going to wane if they went too long, which probably means a lot of civilians died who didn't need to. I think that's room for
okay,
criticism. Based on a couple of articles I've read and a few edge cases, I think their acceptance of collateral deaths is a lot higher than I would expect from a military that obeys within the law. Like I think Jabalia was a really good example of that. Uh, but I think if I can simplify it, I think if they did the war like properly, quote unquote, civilian deaths would still be very, very high, and I think everyone would still be just be calling it war crimes and genocide and all that shit. So you know.
hmm okay. So does it concern you that according to a couple academics who've studied this issue in terms of the destruction of buildings,
Hmm.
right? This is one fellow was a PhD student. He also worked with a professor. Let me pull this up to get the guy's name right. I want to get the exact percentage correct, so I don't misstate it. Um, okay. Does it concern you that 57% of buildings in Gaza were damaged or destroyed as of October 21st? At the rate of this destruction has almost no precedent in the 21st century.
Um, the slightly different stats that I've got. I think if you take out possibly damaged, you're down to 37. I
From the
think
is
total
that from the
50.
online the Israel influencer online? Where are the numbers you have
It's
from
from
themselves for?
Unostat, UN,
Okay, okay, because there's some guy online who's trying, but sure, 37%. When is the date for that?
April.
Okay, so yeah, with that's an extremely high figure too.
So for destroyed, you would have less than 15%. Severely damaged, you would have what, 6, 7? Moderately damaged, a lot more. I don't know what they mean by moderately damaged, possibly. It depends. I think when the situation is different as well because of how Hamas operates, is like they move within civilian infrastructure. Like that's how they operate. So I don't know if this destruction has been like what you're implying by that. I don't expect it to be the same as a war when it's like two nations fighting each other, or even like an operation where civilians have like a lot more space to flee to, or where the military is more distinct. Yeah, I don't know. Where there's been like less time for the whatever
Okay,
military force is there to embed themselves, because Hamas have had since basically since they were formed to secure areas and like control mosques and schools and
yeah,
universities and hospitals
okay,
and shit like that. So yeah.
okay. So that you seem to be unsure about that
Hmm.
um, in terms of this historic destruction of infrastructure. So, well, what about the civilian death rate? The civilian death rate in Gaza is higher. Like if we're talking about kills per month, really like low IQ analysis of this is like, oh my God, more people have died in Syria in 14, way more in 14 years. Okay, yeah,
Mm.
14 years. In terms of civilians killed per month, Israel's killing civilians at a faster rate than any military, any government uh, in the 1990s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020s, except with the exception of governments engaged in genocide
Mm.
or the Second Congo War. Those are the two, which is the bloodiest war since World War II. Those are the two exceptions. So it's worse than the rate of killing is faster than Bashar al-Assad in Syria, faster than Putin in Grozny. That doesn't bother you? You think it's just human shields or what?
Uh, I think I know one example of a attack that would have a higher civilian kill rate, like daily. It'd probably be
Daily.
October
I'm having
7th,
daily.
but
Okay, I use
anyway.
monthly. Yeah.
Um, Again, I don't know, like using that kind of analysis, it doesn't really tell you that much about how each side operates or what the like environment they're fighting in. I don't think know why you would do that. Like, does that, are you suggesting they're targeting civilians? Is that like what where you're going with that? Or I don't know what the implication is.
We don't need to go in. They're taking zero care whatsoever. Like no serious effort to limit civilian
Um,
casualties. No.
I think when it comes to, so if you look at, so, do you know the stat about Hamas? I know one Hamas spokesperson said they'd lost 6,000 Al Qassam fighters, right? In like 2 months
Yeah.
ago. Another Hamas person quickly denied it, but it's like half of what the IDF said they've killed. I'm happy to go with 6,000. Seems about, kind of
I
imagine it
mean, the
being lower,
IDF
but
was IDF in previous so-called wars in Gaza lied about the number of civilians they killed. They did it by and combatants. They did it by counting every police officer killed in Kaslet
okay.
as a combatant, and they also counted. They refused to count any male 16 to 50 as a civilian. They didn't count him as a combatant
Yeah, yeah,
either.
okay.
So
We can get to
they're not
Castlight in
reliable.
a we can get to Castlight in a minute.
They're
The
not
way I
reliable.
would see
They're not
stats
reliable.
is I feel like from where I am with stats, I would say it seems like 20% of Hamas are gone if we take Hamas's number. That if we take that 6,000, when the death rate was just under 30,000, that would mean 20% of the Al Qassam Brigade's fighters are dead. And it would mean that if you take the total civilian death toll, that would mean that they've killed 1% of the civilians in Gaza, or 1.5. It seems to be that if they're killing 20% of Al Qassam fighters by Hamas's numbers, but only 1% of the civilian population, seems to be that they're targeting Hamas fighters.
Well, they're not. They are target. They do want. They are going after Hamas. Yeah, they want to. They'd rather kill Hamas than a civilian.
But you
Definitely,
think
they're
their
targeting.
tolerance of
Yeah,
collateral damage is like
correct.
too high?
In- No, insane. Like historic. I gave you the worst cases. The Second Congo War, worst since World War II,
That doesn't
and
tell you anything about their collateral calculations,
okay.
but um,
Well, we can talk about the calculations because we have sources on that. That talk to the Guardian 972 Meg. I'm sure you've seen these.
mhm.
Uh, but
Yeah, I mean, I've seen
does
those
it
quotes come out, and then I've seen also like all the denials that come from the either side. But
Yeah, I love
you were, what did, yeah, I think you were wrong about Cast Led. They did not say every police officer they killed was Hamas. They said most of them were, right?
no, no, they counted all of them in their official tally. They count all of them as Hamas,
In the
as
Orient
combatants.
Research Group that was getting to the
Isn't
Goldstone, they
Israel.
did not say that.
That's not Israel, dopey. That's a fucking think tank that likes Israel, or that's associated with them. Israel's numbers were uh, they counted all the cops killed as combatants. So you're wrong.
Did they say that? So does the fact that
No,
most of them were make a difference?
no, how you're changing no, okay. That's we can get in, that's we can debate about whether most were or not, and how they defined that, or this think tank. But Israel counted all of them as police, which is not true, as combatants, which was a lie.
Okay, yeah, it seems that it was like between 75 and 80%, right?
Okay, yeah, but it's still a lie to count 20 is. They're wrong, but it's still a lie to count 20. Yes.
Why are they wrong about the cops being
Can we
Hamas?
not get ballot, please? Let's go. We'll talk about Consulate later. Like we will talk about it, but Israel counted all of them. You were factually incorrect. Israel counted all of them as police, which was wrong, which was dishonest. And they counted every civilian. They refused to count civilians 16 to 50 male as combatants, even if there's no evidence they were.
Wait.
Sorry,
Actually, out of
civilians.
interest, again, I've only brushed through this part on the police recently. I don't recall Israel saying they counted every cop as Hamas
They did.
member. Can you show
Are
me
we
that?
really going through?
Yeah,
Yes,
I'd be interested to see
yes.
that. Yeah, I could be wrong. I'm
Okay.
just curious.
Yeah, you are wrong.
Okay, just show me. Yeah.
So yeah, the IDF regards Gazan police as part of the Hamas armed forces, which was false. They were not incorporated into the armed forces. So here, I'll send this to you.
Is this from Goldstone report or?
No, it's from like the Israeli government website. But now the link is dead. So yeah, I'm happy to give this to you. Okay, here it is, archive, perfect. But I feel like this is a bit of a gish gallop from the current war. But we can talk about Cat Sled in a second. Okay, police. Let's see this. Oh, sure. Yeah, they argue. They specifically they argue on their website that the police were. I'll send this link to you. that the police were incorporated into the armed forces, and therefore they count all of them as.
No,
Like this is
wait. Therefore, they're
no,
saying they incorporated. Yeah, we know that. Well, at least that's the claim, is that the police were incorporated into Al
they
Qassam
really
brigades. Like they
bring
were
in.
very.
You're wrong.
Yeah,
Like,
the police were
yeah,
incorporated into Hamas. Yes, that's not saying every single officer
no,
was
dude,
Hamas.
like, if they, guy, if first of all they're okay. So there are two issues here. The first issue is, were they incorporated? If they were incorporated, you would count them as Hamas. If they're incorporated into Al Qassam, they're combatants.
Yeah, but
They
that's the thing,
weren't.
is like calling them Hamas is different. If
No,
they're like, if every officer counts as, but that doesn't make them a
bro,
combatant.
you
If you're
haven't
just
read the
Hamas, you're not a
Hamas
combatant.
article.
You're Al Qassam. You're a combatant.
No, but they argued they were incorporated into the Hamas armed forces. That's what Israel argued, and that is how they count. That's why their count was just radically different than everyone else's.
I'm just
And then
looking.
the
Hang
other
on.
thing,
Incorporated.
why are you obsessing over something you're wrong about? It's not even that big of a deal. Just read this
I
stuff.
think it would matter if they were actually counting every single
Okay,
cop
figure it out.
as.
They did. That's what they did.
And this is from a link you sent me. I can't see anything for incorporated apart from incorporated into rules of engagement for the Gaza operation. Where are you? Where's that in the link you sent me?
Okay.
If they're saying that there's a systematic incorporation into the
Okay.
police force,
No, no, no.
police force from Hamas, that doesn't mean you're saying every single cop is
248.
Hamas.
It's 248. It's 248. The evidence indicates that considering Hamas police casualties as civilians is inappropriate. The reality is that the Internal Security Service have been and continue to be a cadre of terrorist operatives, blah, 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 blah. Under the
248.
laws of armed conflict, Israel is permitted to target such forces in their base. Like, we wasted 5 minutes on something you're wrong on, you haven't read about. It's stupid.
This evidence demonstrates that considering Hamas police civilian casualties as civilians is inappropriate. The reality is that the internal security forces have been and continue to be a cadre of terrorist operatives armed with a variety of weapons. Such forces, this isn't saying every single officer, though.
Dude, that's sorry, I lost my headphones. It's saying that. Like, I've not read this carefully.
That's a much more categorical claim, right? That every officer is a Al Qassam fighter.
It's clearly implied with a passage. You're like holding on to this in some debate, bro. Now, you want to just bet $5,000 on this or something so we can move on?
How would you bet $5,000 on this? Like, I can't
They
bet
counted all
$5,000
of
someone
them
who
as-
reads something and sees something else, because you'll just say you won every time. What?
Okay. They counted all police killed as combatants.
They're saying that considering. Where? Show me that.
All right. Can we just do this? Can we talk about the other war and then we'll get to Casled? Like, I need to find a link, a secondary source which says this, which is in fact true.
Because just saying it's implied, I know that that
Clearly
there's a
implied.
list that came from the Orient group that clearly distinguished them. But I
Yeah, that
don't think I've
sounds
ever seen the
Israel.
IDF or anyone say like every single like officer that died was an Al Qassam fighter. No, they're talking
No,
about
they said they
like
were all combatants. No,
they're saying
they said they were
considering
all.
Hamas police casualties as civilians, which again, because their argument is that a bunch of the people who were police who were considered civilians
No,
were
it's not.
inappropriately labeled because they were Al Qassam.
No, it's not. Their argument is that they were incorporated into Al Qassam systematically, so they're all fair game. That was their argument.
Again, but if you have something a bit clearer than this is not necessarily implying that. No way.
Oh my god. All right, I'll get Goldstone. You might say that's fake or something. The whole debate, you haven't read the Goldstone, but the whole debate about this was whether they were in fact incorporated. Because if they were incorporated, then they would all be combatants.
No, they
Right?
wouldn't.
The police.
No, not
Yes,
if you
they
incorporate
would.
into Hamas. No. You have to be Al Qassam. You can be a Hamas,
No,
like you can be a police officer with like a Hamas
Mhm.
badge, or you can be like a party member. That doesn't make you
No,
a
no,
combatant.
obviously not. But the argument Israel made was that they were incorporated into the armed forces of Hamas. That was the argument Israel made.
Yes, I know they said they were incorporated because that would mean that there was a sufficient, that it would lead you to the suggestion that there is a sufficient number of Al Qassam fighters who are also involved in the police. That people are working like basically 2 jobs. Yes. Which means that striking police buildings would mean that it would be justified if there were like a large enough amount of Al Qassam people there, but not just because it's like incorporated into Hamas.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Unless you're showing me something different, like apart from just like your poor interpretation of a paragraph.
Okay. Okay. I will find this link before I turn off the a link that says this. I mean, I don't know why you're obsessing over something you clearly haven't read carefully. The whole debate and
I've
did you read
clearly
the
read it more
Goldstone report?
carefully than you. Like I've read I haven't read the entire 450 pages, but I've read the part about the police. And
Yeah, the whole part is
Goldstone's
the whole debate
argument
is,
against them, against actually also
oh my
Goldstone's argument
God.
against these police officers being, like the majority of them not being Hamas is like it's pathetic. He takes like a quote from one of the Hamas spokespersons when he's saying that
No,
like on the early days
you're
of the war, he's
completely
saying that
misunderstanding.
officers have received clear orders from the leadership to face the enemy if the Gaza Strip will be invaded, which suggests they were combatants. But then Goldstone just goes to the guy and says, "What did you mean by that?" He said, "Oh, when we said face the enemy, we actually just meant like ensuring basic foodstuffs reach the population." And Goldstone just accepted it. Or then he like when he said that maybe some people were identified on Hamas websites, he just said, "Oh, but they do that all the time. They just call them martyrs or shaheed without even looking at the methodology of how they decided who was a combatant." It was ridiculous. It's a joke.
You're misunderstanding the whole. You can say those things are a joke, fine. We I don't have the inclination to get into that. You're just misunderstanding the very basic issue at heart here. The issue is not. He does talk about how many were, how many weren't, but the core issue is whether they were systematically incorporated into the armed forces or not. If they were systematically incorporated, they are fair game. And
If they're
Golson argued they
systematically
were not.
incorporated, it would suggest that a large number of them are Al Qassam fighters who
You're
are
like
fair game. Yes.
changing, you're changing the issue because you don't know what you're talking about.
Well,
It's so
because I know
annoying.
that this is the argument. This is the argument that came from Orient. This is like I can't seem to see anything like contradictory from the IDF themselves
Orient.
about
I
it.
mean, my God. Idea. Okay, so your statement is, can
Fair
we just
game.
like
Okay, if I say
share
that
this?
this, if I say this, this particular police HQ has been incorporated into Hamas, it's fair game. But when I say that, what I actually mean is that 3/4 of the people in there are Al Qassam. Would that be? Could I
No,
not
they
use that
argued
sentence? Could I not use that sentence
it,
if I said it that
it would
way?
be subject. It would be subject to proportionality analysis and probably would be a war crime.
If
The
75% of the people were Al
Yeah,
Qassam,
yeah. I don't think you understand very much about how the law of armed conflict works. Like, just because it'd be 3-to-1 ratio doesn't mean you could just massacre a quarter of the police intentionally. But regardless, look, I need to find a secondary source that
I
says
feel
this.
like
I
that would
promise it
I
to.
feel like that would matter if it like if it, again like if it's
Oh my
being used if
God,
the actual
dude.
building and the institution is being used for the purpose of Al Qassam brigades and to serve that purpose, then and there most of the people in it are Al Qassam fighters.
Okay, so here's a statement of the Goldstone report. The Israeli government has not suggested that the attacks on the police, so the killing of these police, was not intended. Their argument was that it was instead incorporate into the armed forces, so that and then they would be combatants if they were
Yeah,
all.
if it's
If,
incorporated into the armed forces, that
that's the whole
suggests that
point.
a
They
large
counted
number of
all of
people
them
in
as
those buildings
combatants.
were armed forces, which makes
You're
them
changing the
targets.
subject. You're wrong. I'm bored of this. Let's. So do you deny that Israel? Let's talk about another thing. Do you deny that Israel refused to count in their compilations of casualties in Kessler and Protective Edge? They just did not count. They didn't count them as combatants, but they didn't count them as civilians. Any 16 to 50-year-old they killed.
I don't know about that claim.
Male. Sorry. Okay, you just don't know.
Hmm.
Okay, well they did that.
Okay, but I'm just wondering why. So do you think the majority of those police officers who were killed were Al Qassam or just like civilians?
You're changing the subject from something you were wrong about. The point is they counted all of them as killed as combatants, and that was a lie.
Even
Alas.
though that hasn't been said, no. They did not.
So
Saying that the institution is incorporated doesn't mean that every single person in the building is Al Qassam. I don't know how did that
no,
even make
you don't
sense?
understand how this works. Like you just don't understand the extreme basics of this issue in the Goldstone report. If they were incorporated and you join, if a group is incorporated into Al Qassam and you join it, you are fair game. That is lawful.
Does that mean that every single person in the building is an Al Qassam fighter?
If they were incorporated in a sense that in some analogous sense they would be. You just do not understand this issue at all.
No, not necessarily. No, especially because the police have more than one use.
Okay, so um, whenever a party, that's what the Goldstone report quotes. Whenever it's from the Geneva Conventions. Whenever a party to a conflict incorporates a paramilitary or armed law enforcement agency into its armed forces, this is then fair game. So like, I don't understand why you seem to be trying to like change the subject from something you were wrong about. It's weird, but
What do you mean I'm changing the subject? Like I don't know
no, the
why you're
point is,
making a claim that you just don't have. Like you're applying the most stretched interpretation of a statement. to say that they counted every single person who died as Hamas in that building.
Well, okay, I've read this. I know it for a fact. I need to find a secondary source where it says this. I promise you I'll post it to Twitter
And
afterwards.
what is
You're
it?
wrong about
Is the wording actually going to say something along the lines of they counted
no, it'll be
every
clear.
dead officer as
Yeah, it will
Hamas?
be clear. I'm sure you can find a human
It'll be
rights group that says this is
categorical. It won't
true.
be that they said this institution was incorporated into the armed forces and therefore was fair game. And you're going to say, I told you, every single person who died was Hamas, was considered Hamas. You're not going to do that, are you?
Like, dude, I will show to a fair-minded person that this is what they did. Also, bro, you can simply look at the total. I mean, I don't know. Like, if you want to pretend you know what you're talking about, you can. But I'm tired of this point. I will find a secondary source that says this. I know it for a fact. I've studied Gaslight. So let's move on to another.
If you've
And you
studied
don't
Cast
deny
Lead, why don't you have any strong opinion on the majority of the cops being Al Qassam or not then?
you're. The
Is it
problem
because
you're
you used to say that the cops were massacred? Is that maybe the position you used to have, like the Finkelstein take, or what?
I never, I didn't say the police were massacred. The issue there is classification of whether they're combatants or not. That would be the issue.
In
Are we
reality,
really
in
going to keep
Cast Lead, Israel massacred police officers without any evidence that they had taken up arms or been incorporated into Hamas. Is this an old take, or is this like a
I mean,
quiet
no,
retraction?
okay, well, so you're just like finding a tweet? Like a massacre. Yeah, I mean, the word massacre would be hyperbole in that context, but it certainly was murder or violation of the laws of armed conflict.
Even would that be the case if the majority of the people who died in the strikes were Hamas? Were Al Qassam? Because that's not the
Look,
take that most of the
look,
humanitarian organizations have. Even the Goldstone report, this is why I get skeptical about UN reports these days, is because their consensus is that the cops were on the whole not Al Qassam, but that just doesn't seem to be true.
okay, so in terms of the classification of these individuals, I just do not recall this. I remember concluding it was false, but I don't recall this particular what is Orient Group or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Goldstone, you thought you'd read the Goldstone report. Goldstone criticizes the Orient Group because he says that some people they just list as Al Qassam because they're Hamas members. But being
Right.
a Hamas member doesn't make you a combatant. That's the Goldstone argument.
Yeah, that's the Goldstone argument. It's
But it's
correct.
shit because you can just look at fucking the Al Qassam Brigade's website and their list of martyrs and
Look
find
at
out
their
that actually
website.
they list these
I've
people
looked into
and
this.
say that
No,
they
no,
joined Al Qassam in 2006. Like they do that, yeah. Even
no.
for actually Orient of all people actually undercounted because they listed at least one person who was not Hamas. But then if you go to the Al Qassam website, there's literally a fucking video of this dude like training and shit with a gun and like full combat gear. So yeah.
Okay, so your contention is that everyone I've seen these websites and there definitely are people in biographies and so on. I've read this a while ago.
Yeah.
The Arabic, yeah. But your contention is that the Orient figures are correct, that it isn't 50% or 48% or 45%, because I don't my recollection is that they're much lower than the Orient figures if you look at the websites. And I'm going to try to find, because I looked at this a while ago. I'm going to try to find it. And I don't remember it very well.
Based on what I saw from Orient, and again, that guy like I looked through a few
No,
of these yesterday and just matched the names with Hamas's website, but it just seemed to be that like there were one person that Orient listed as Feta, who turned out to be an Al Qassam fighter, and then one person was just listed as police force, and he also turned out to be a
I'm talking
Hamas
about
fighter. So
figures. I'm
yeah,
talking about
they
figures.
might have
I'm
undercounted
not
if anything.
talking about, okay, you don't know that, right? Because I did this a while ago. I'm going to try to find where I put this. Because I looked at these pictures. And I remember it was a larger percentage than I expected. And that may be the reason why I wouldn't use the term massacre for this if I used that in the past. Because it was a larger percentage than I expected. And as you say, some of them have like details with the level of specificity that, to my eye, call into question Goldstone's explanation. It is true that Hamas does this, right? Like they like cite people who were killed as martyrs, even if they didn't have
Yeah, they claim
involvement.
people as martyr, but not as Al Qassam
No,
or Mujahid, right? Like or
right,
whatever you say
right,
that
right,
they
right.
don't do that.
These people had biographical information. I'm trying to find where I had my recollection is that it was far below what the Orient estimated, and they were in fact counting civilian members as look. this old statement I wouldn't make again
Mhm.
because the percentage was higher than I expected. I think it was like 50% or something like that. It was well below Orient, or maybe 45. I'm trying to find out where I fucking had this.
I mean,
Okay,
last night
there. I'm on the right track then.
I just control F 2008 on the Hamas website and just went through, and the first 20 I found were all in Orient and all Al Qassam, apart from two actually, which Orient didn't even list as Al Qassam. So
Okay.
so
Yeah.
far the trend is looking like there were quite a lot of those guys were Al Qassam fighters, even though that is against not only the Goldstone report but also the majority of human rights organizations who list those people as police, like civilian police. Like they said they were traffic cops basically.
The other problem with this is though, like if you demobilize, here's the problem with this: if you demobilize, you are no longer fair game.
Yeah, but there's no evidence that these guys were demobilized.
Well, they may have been. I mean, we don't know. I mean, this is. I agree that these data call into question, which is why I wouldn't use the word massacre
I mean, on some
anymore.
of these biographies, they're talking about guys who had just been like like launching rockets at Israel. It's usually, yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, um, I found 136 of these people. This was way back a few months ago. I found 136 people on these websites that were and I double checked this, that were in the military wing, that were police. So that would be very considerable percentage of the police. It would be slightly over 50%. So yeah, but it's not anywhere near as high as Orient. That's my point. And the reason I would say I would not use massacre, and I would think that was incorrect, 55%. I counted all 248 people there, by the way. Um, the reason I wouldn't count that as the reason I wouldn't use the word massacre, I would use certainly war crime, obviously, is because the majority of people killed were combatants, um, possibly, right? We don't know that for sure, but I agree with you that I certainly don't agree with your deprecation of the report in general. I think that's ridiculous.
Well,
But
this
I
one
agree
bit
with you
I've
that
seen is like
no,
really, really embarrassing. So, I
this
mean,
is well,
yeah.
okay, yeah, it's very.
But
I
even
don't
you,
think
I mean,
it's
like the fact is,
pure.
like your reading of it was just that you thought that they decided that every single person in that
They
building must
did,
have been
they did,
Al
they
Qassam,
did.
even though, yeah, okay,
We're
but I
going
guess
back
you'll
to
show
this
me that
now.
later. That's
So,
fine. Yeah.
yeah, so they killed, according to B'Tselem, 248 police. 100 and we have evidence of, by my count, 136 were Al-Qassam. Your meme think tank counted people who were just civilian members of Hamas or political members of Hamas's combatants. That's
No, they
erroneous.
didn't. No, they didn't. At least not what I've seen.
Yeah, they did.
I've checked some of their names with the Al Qassam website. They absolutely don't. There's
Yeah,
one
they did.
person. There's one person that Orient mentioned who was a Hamas member, but they don't call them Al Qassam. There's one person. There's one
Okay,
person they said wasn't anything, but he was Al Qassam. So
yeah,
no, they
yeah,
did not automatically say if you're Hamas, you were Al Qassam. They didn't do that.
yeah, they did do that, but that's okay.
Okay, I look forward to seeing your list. I mean, I've got 20 names so far, so give me a few hours, I'll find the
The
rest. But
fact that some of them were Hamas, which I've conceded, I did a count of this, does not prove that their methodology didn't overcount. That's very silly.
no, it just seems that so far, like they seem to have not only counted, it seems to be pretty accurately, down to like the dates of birth of these people, um, but also that they might have undercounted, but who knows?
Uh-huh.
Right.
Okay. Regardless.
Also,
Okay.
sorry,
Here's
Destiny's
my
asking if
point.
he wants to come into the call. I guess you did want the. I won't make it a 2v1, but you can talk to him if you want.
Yeah, I'll talk to him.
Okay. I think you have to add him to the call. How do you do that?
I think I'm blocked by him on um yeah.
I
But I will concede. I will concede because I haven't read. I read Goldstone, of course, but I haven't read this for a few months. I looked at this. I will concede. The term massacre, if I used it several months ago, I would not use for the police. I would say it's a war crime because they've violated the principle of distinction. Yeah, but the massacre I definitely would use for this framework of a term.
would it be a violation of principle of distinction if it turned out that
Yes,
most of the people were actually Al Qassam?
yes. Well, you'd have to then do a proportionality analysis, but their motivation was to kill police as such because they were incorporated. They don't deny that to Goldstone, right? So yeah, it would be a
Well, it also
violation of this.
seems to be that they believed and had good reason to believe that most of the people in those buildings were Al Qassam fighters. But anyway, I'll end the call and call you back because I think I need to be the one who does the adding.
Okay.
Okay, guys, what are we talking about?
Yeah, okay, since I have Destiny here, so lovely, like, I just want to criticize you for saying a bunch of things that are false and dishonest. One example is, I don't know if this is like you still haven't read this, even though you talked about it in two massive debates, but the idea that the UN report and the Great March of Return didn't do an IHL analysis is totally bogus. They did both IHL and police. As if you read the
Wait, why
report,
do you think that IHL wouldn't apply to policing stuff?
they analyze it both as an armed conflict, dopey, and as I can find you the direct quote if you want to like do your debate, bro, shit, but.
Okay, I'll read the direct quote. So this is from the advanced thing for the UN report that you were referencing earlier. F, legal assessment of the demonstrations. In the Commission's view, the demonstrations were civilian in nature, had clearly stated political aims, and, despite some acts of significant violence, did not constitute combat or a military campaign. Thus, the legal framework applicable to policing the protests was that of law enforcement based in international human rights law. This assessment did not change following the Commission's investigation into the demonstrators' affiliation to or membership in organized armed groups. Do you admit that you were wrong?
No, I don't, because they analyzed both for comprehensiveness' sake. Their view was it's just an it's a police issue, but they also analyze it in terms of IHL. They talked about the law of distinction. They analyzed it in terms of the law of armed conflict and found under the law of armed conflict, only one of the people killed in the massacre was killed justifiably.
That's
So, yeah,
because when you analyze it as a policing event,
Destiny, stop being a charlatan. Read.
Okay, you're right. I'm sorry. Let me read. Founded in the right to life, law enforcement rules based on international human rights law permits potentially lethal force by law enforcement agencies or security forces only in self-defense or for the defense of others when there is an imminent threat to life. That means that it was analyzed as a policing event, and the reason why they said all of the particular shootings were unjustified is because the police officers themselves weren't being threatened. But that's not analyzing it like an armed conflict. When you got to
Can someone give me the link to the part we're looking at, please? I just want to see it on my screen.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yes, you didn't read the report. You don't read. You embarrass yourself publicly. It's kind of sad. But
can you respond to what I just read?
My response is that their view, their assessment is that this was not an armed conflict. However, they applied the laws of armed conflict, assuming that this would be contested by Israel and other bodies.
Can you read for me the report where they say that?
They apply, Destiny, they do a distinction.
I'm waiting for a quote. I'm waiting for a quote where you can read me that.
You're such a fucking fraud. I don't have a quote where
So to be clear, you called me a fraud. You claimed I read Wikipedia, and you claimed that I don't read. And I gave you two statements out of the UN's advanced copy for the report of this that clearly disagreed with your position.
$10,000 bet that they applied the.
I'm not posturing. I'm simply asking you to source me from within the document. Are you okay?
They apply $10,000 bet that they applied the law of armed conflict as an analysis here.
Can you just source me? Can you just source me from within either of these documents, either the full 250-page report or the 22-page advanced copy? I lent you both of those LonerBox. No, that they didn't analyze this as a policing event.
Okay, they analyzed this both. You deny that. You deny they analyzed it as both.
I don't understand what you mean when you say they analyzed it as both.
They applied the law of armed conflict and said, assuming this is, even though they don't think it is, assuming this was a war, how would there be war crimes here? Did they do that or no? Did they talk about war crimes?
I think you can commit war crimes as a policing body. Can you just quote me? Wait. Why are you using so many exasperated expressions?
Because you are a fraud. I am exasperated.
I just read you two quotes. I read you two quotes from this document. Can you just give me a single quote from the document? Can you just read from it?
They applied international humanitarian law.
Yes, that's part of what you would do with a policing event. Yes.
No, it is not. International humanitarian law is part of the law of armed conflict, dopey. Like, you're just wrong and you don't care because you're a sociopath. Like, you want me to find some quote that's paraphrasing exactly what I said? No, they clearly did this. It's common sense. If
they clearly did it, then you should just show me very easily where in the document where they do that.
$10,000 bet that they did this.
No, I'm not going to posture with money. Just show me in the document where they do this.
Sorry, wait. Before I bring in Avi, are you okay with Avi coming in? History, he says he can clear it up.
No, just to clear up, I think you're
I don't want Avi in here.
Okay. All right. Well,
let's have three people.
What if Destiny leaves? No, I'm sorry. I'll just get rid of Avi. Hang on.
I'm leaving in like 20 minutes. So you're
okay. Avi can. All right. See you soon, Avi.
So your position is. Let me just get your position because you want a quote or something like that. Did they apply the law of armed conflict and analyze whether war crimes or crimes against humanity were committed? Crimes against humanity.
My understanding is that you can use armed conflict analysis for, or that for international humanitarian law, policing stuff would happen. Can I finish my sentence, please, before you like make it? You can mute your mic or just use push to talk. There's no reason for you to be talking in the middle of when I'm trying to answer your question. Is that okay? Okay. So my understanding is there are parts of armed conflict or parts of international humanitarian law that might govern like how policing events look, but you're not analyzing it as an armed conflict, because an ongoing armed conflict is going to give you greater deference to attack or kill certain people that a policing event wouldn't give you the ability to attack or kill.
They analyze this through the law of armed conflict and through policing international human rights law. That's what happened. You can play debate bro tricks to be dishonest. That's clearly what happened. You know this now because you're now reading the document for maybe the first time.
No, I read it before. That's why I was confident saying it before, and that's why I just read you the quotes that I was familiar with. I haven't read to be fair to you, I've skimmed the full 250-page report. I read the full 22-page report. So maybe you know something in this larger 250-page report that disagrees with what I was saying. That's why I'm curious if there was something in here, but it seems like you haven't.
I have a clarifying question.
Yeah.
So apparently the contention is that under local policing, it would be that one death was justified because it posed threat to the actual person. But
correct.
Under laws of armed conflict, did they have the same number? Was it still only one? HistorySpeaks?
It's literally the first page.
No, I'm just asking you, was it even under the laws of armed conflict, it was only one death that was justified?
100%.
Is that because, so in the laws of armed conflict, does someone have to pose an immediate threat to an officer's life before they can kill them?
The problem is it violated the principle of distinction. These people were not combatants.
No, that's not what I asked you. I'm asking you if under the laws of armed conflict, was it also the case that only one death was justified?
Yes.
For the same reason? But it wouldn't be for the same reason. In laws of armed conflict, you can kill someone. In laws of armed conflict, you can kill someone who is not posing an immediate threat to your life, right? You can airstrike.
You asked me something that was a gotcha. I've read the report, and the answer is yes. It was one in both cases.
I'm asking you if it was for the same reason, or is it just it kind of been the same reason?
Why are you changing the subject? No, it's not the same reason. Obviously, there's different laws.
So what's the reason?
So there are ways that you could kill people in an armed conflict that would be illegal for a policing event, correct?
Okay, guys.
Wait. If you can't answer that question, that's just a very easy question.
Can you be honest for 5 seconds and just listen? You wanted to.
No, you're not answering the question.
Okay, I'm going to make one point first. Do you understand? So first of all, just a general point. Do you understand that find a quote where this exact thing is stated? You can read a document without remembering, oh, page 284, this. So that's the first thing. It was a stupid.
No, wait. Okay, let me respond to that first point. Oh my God.
It's a stupid, disingenuous tactic. No, I'm going to now read this. ISF conduct, this is a direct quote from page 1, the summary. So even Destiny presumably has read this. Also violate international humanitarian law, which permits civilians to be targeted only when they directly participate in hostilities. They're talking about principle of distinction. This purposely high threshold was not met by the demonstrators' conduct in the view of the commission, with one possible exception on 14 May. So there's one person who directly participated in hostilities according to the view of the commission. And they applied the laws of armed conflict. So you're just completely wrong in trying to find some weird parse debate bro thing where you're right, but you're clearly wrong. I mean, you guys are just have lost like empathy or human like connection. It's just weird. This internet stuff isn't good for you, even though we've made a lot of money on it, Destiny. But yeah.
You're throwing in a lot of ad homs for someone who doesn't like debate bros.
So the highly contentious issue relating to the Great March of Return has to do with which people were considered participating in hostilities. So I believe from the Israeli side, and I've seen legal scholars argue, that because the Great March of Return as a whole, the goal of the event was like militaristic in nature, and the events themselves contained elements of Hamas and other militaristic activities, that any civilian that was taking part in these demonstrations, especially approaching or attacking the border, would be considered as participating, being an active member in armed hostilities. Now, this UN report disagrees with that. And that's why they say that in their report that international humanitarian law was in effect and operated as lex specialis during active hostilities. So they only consider like the very particular instances of where things happen as part of active hostilities, and they didn't consider the event as a whole.
Let's go away from abstractions and talk about what your lovely idea is.
Hold on, I'm so sorry. If you want to respond to my points, you can't just hand wave. When you say abstractions, I'm quoting and reading and speaking specifically about this event. I don't know what you mean. What part of what I just said? Wait. What part of what I just said was an abstraction?
You're saying they participate in hostilities, blah blah. So
I
let's
don't
see
know
if
why
they
you're
actually-
why are you using that voice to summarize? I'm just asking you. What part of what I just said was an abstraction to you?
I'm not going to be distracted by these nonsense.
You hold on. You're the one that used the term. Just don't say that next time. Just respond
No.
to what I'm saying instead of trying to summarize it or generalize it in a bad faith manner.
Okay, we're going to go through your other nonsense too later. But so I'm going to give examples of people shot by the IDF with no prosecution, and you tell me whether you think they were cases where international.
Oh, this is
humanitarian
good. This
laws
is a really good tactic. He does this. He's going to read out
no,
like the name of someone and their
exactly.
age and that they were
Data.
shot, as if it's like
Okay,
an
sure.
isolated.
Yeah, go for it.
okay.
Sure.
Okay, go for it. Great. 24-year-old footballer took out his cell phone and began recording a video, was 150 feet away from the fence, shot. Is this justified? Another one.
What is the
21-year-old.
wait? You're asking me a question. So
No
for the first one,
weapons.
yeah. So for the first one, so first of all, having weapons isn't a necessary part of being a party to an armed conflict or actively participating in armed conflict. So the weapons part is not relevant. Number one. Number two, what is the range at which you're supposed to stay away from that fence before the signs warn you that you will be shot for violating the zone?
You're now applying Israeli occupation policy and confusing that with the laws of armed conflict, which is strange. But the principle.
Wait. So do you think that
they can disperse them, but they can't kill them? No.
So what happens if the people walk up to the wall and start like cutting through? You're not allowed to ever shoot or kill those people ever?
No, cutting through, you cannot kill them over that. No. That's
really?
clearly
So if
not
people were approaching any border to a country and the border says do not cross here, here's the border, and a bunch of people ran through and they started to try to like break through the border, you're telling me
No,
the
you can't
military of that
slow them
country wouldn't
down,
have the right
no.
to shoot those people?
If they're unarmed and they're not attacking you, no. If they're throwing a grenade at you, if they're throwing a Molotov cocktail at you, yeah. That's just how the law of armed conflict works. So this
Really?
way
Can
you
you,
read
where do you? Okay. Yeah, you said I need to read more. Can you show me where? Which international rule would you be referring to here for customary, or like what particular convention would you be referring
I'm
to?
talking about the principle of distinction. You have to
What do you
distinguish.
think the principle of distinction means?
The principle of distinction refers to distinguishing between civilians and military forces. That's what that refers to.
When you say military forces, what you're talking about are people you're talking about military forces that are parties to an armed conflict. Do you know that civilians can lose their civilian status by becoming parties to armed conflict? And one of the ways of doing that might be attacking a border?
They didn't attack a border. This guy was standing there.
You just said that if you ran up to a border and started cutting it with wire cutters, that you wouldn't be considered party to an armed conflict?
Correct. No, that is not a party to an armed conflict.
So what is there
It would also
anything that could
violate
make you a
proportionality.
did you
So you think they
wait,
killed a
do you
14-year-old?
think
They killed a 14-year-old girl. I don't remember they killed. They shot a 14-year-old girl who cut the border fence. You think that was justified during IHL? I just want to get a specific thing.
yes, obviously and easily, of course.
You're a lunatic. You're totally crazy. This is nuts. So okay, I'm going to read more cases. I want to hear you justify it. It's kind of
No, it
interesting
seems like we don't even agree on the first one, so there's literally
19-year-old
no point in going through.
No, we're gonna go through it. 19-year-old.
No, there's no point. You just said that a bunch of people can approach a border, try to cut through, and you wouldn't consider that like a part of like a conflict, or you wouldn't consider a nation that having the right to defend their borders like that.
No,
Yeah.
It's a law enforcement issue. But even if they're civilians, clearly.
How is it? It can't be a law enforcement issue. They're not the law enforcement body in the Gaza Strip. Hamas is.
You're a lunatic. Okay, I'm gonna read.
Wait. What part of what I just said do you disagree with? You just called me a lunatic. How am I a lunatic?
All of it. I'm gonna read cases. I want you to tell me whether.
No,
it's,
why do you can't just say a thing and skirt on?
Data. Let's get data, not talk abstractions.
No, we're not talking Why do you keep saying abstractions?
Because I want to talk about data. Here is a man.
No, we're not talking about data. We're taking law and we're applying it to individual cases.
So a 14-year-old girl can be killed for running up to the border fence and trying to cut through it.
That's my understanding. Yes. You're telling me no, you can't be killed for trying to break through somebody's border?
No, a 14-year-old girl trying to cut I mean.
Why do you say 14-year-old girl? Do you think if they're 20 years old, does that change it? If a 20-year-old was trying to cut through the border fence?
No, it still wouldn't be justified, but that would be another consideration. It would be another consideration whether this person's a combatant or not, whether it's a 14-year-old girl.
Would you have said the same thing?
Wait, why? 14-year-old can't be a party to combat?
14-year-old girl, it's extremely unlikely.
Well, hold on, no, wait. That's not what you just said. You just said so they can't be, or they're unlikely to be, or what? Do you think that 18 and older is the only party to a conflict? You can't be a soldier at 13, 14, 15?
In these weird ways.
I'm not changing the subject. I'm asking you a specific question. You just said 14-year-old girl, like a girl or a 14-year-old can't be a party to an armed conflict.
Low info, low empathy charlatan. Let's move on. Another case. Yusuf, 19-year-old journalist wearing a press
No,
vest.
I'm not moving on. We haven't agreed on the first one.
You're bringing up irrelevancies.
Okay. All right, I'm taking off. Loner, I don't think this guy has an education, by the way. I'm pretty sure he's like literally just fronts on it, but because this is a pretty funny dude.
He's quite knowledgeable. He doesn't have any like critical thinking skills, but that's okay.
Quite knowledgeable on what? On what part?
I don't know. He's memorized a few things.
He's memorized a couple things, but
yeah. Okay. So you justified killing a 14-year-old girl. That was fun. One more case, Destiny. I want to hear whether you justify it. So 16-year-old boy climbed on high ground, 500 meters away from the fence, distributing sandwiches, shot in the face with a bullet. Is that justified?
No prosecution. Reading it doesn't sound like it, but I'd have to look into the details of the case.
Okay, another guy, 25-year-old mechanic, shot in the abdomen. He was 300 feet away, wrapped in a Palestinian flag from the fence. Not
300 feet away? Sounds like he was violating the no-go area. Oh, meters? I'm not sure. I would need more information about it.
Here's the thing. Why are you lying about the plausibility thing insofar as you made this? I mean, we were wrong about that, clearly, because the woman who knows more about this said it.
Wait, wrong about what plausibility thing?
You're lying that we were wrong about that. Finkelstein was wrong about it. I was wrong about that. People who said plausibility were wrong, right? But you were wrong too. In the debate, you accepted the premise that it was plausible genocide, and you just say plausibility doesn't mean much. So you're lying that that other people were wrong about this and you were right, and therefore it vindicates your horrific.
Well, if you can argue in a very technical sense that I was incorrect, but the correctness is even more in my direction than it was on the other side. My initial analysis is I said that the plausibility standard that they were looking for was the plausibility of whether or not the prima facie merits of the case had been met, meaning is there plausibly a genocide or do the parties who are bringing the case have standing? However, they're not actually even looking at the plausibility of a genocide occurring. They're looking at the plausibility of somebody's rights being violated under the Genocide Convention. So it's technically even less in that direction. But for the most part, I was pretty correct. I think my interpretation was far closer than Finkelstein's and Rabbani's.
It may help your case that we were wrong about this, but you were wrong about the same thing. So
I wasn't wrong about the same thing. The direction that I was in was far more cautious, far more hedged, and far closer to what the actual ruling on that case. Well, not the ruling of it, but the analysis of that case was compared to the other side that was saying that it's very likely that a genocide is occurring. They weren't even close to that. That's why I was reading quotes from the judges on that case, and they were just screaming at me using ad homs like you are. That was the difference there.
What about why did you tweet on May 4th and not correct that 300 IDF soldiers were injured? Like, you just totally did misinformation about the Great March of Return. So it shows you didn't read the report, one, and a few killed.
Well, I mean, to be clear, I think I might have been mistaken about that number. That might have been a total number of people that were injured over the totality of the conflict, and that included rockets being sent in at that time. I might have been incorrect on that. I haven't gone back and checked. However, I just want to be clear. You have absolutely no right to say who's read something or hasn't when you don't know a single thing coming from the report. Do you acknowledge that?
You were wrong about Destiny. No, you were completely wrong. They applied IHL and said only one was justified.
You haven't. You're
completely wrong. You're debate throwing. You're debate throwing, and you're wrong. You know you're wrong.
I'm not. To be clear, I'm not debate broing. I'm speaking like an academic. You're debate broing. You're debate broing. If you are truly an academic and you have a PhD, you need an annotation or you need to be able to cite somewhere in this report that agrees with you. You're giving me a page from the summary that doesn't even say what you think it says.
You were wrong, and you embarrassed yourself. You're also wrong about. Right. I mean, do you want me to go through other misstatements you've made? Or
I just wanted I wanted a single part of this report that says that they analyzed.
They analyzed it through IHL. I mean, they clearly.
I don't know why you think IHL is different than.
It's part of the law of armed conflict.
I'm pretty sure a law of armed conflict can also speak of policing events, and they didn't analyze the entirety of this event as an armed conflict, only some special parts.
You didn't read the report.
I did read the report. That's why I gave you quotes from the report, and you gave me a quote from page 1.
Destiny, you know you're lying. Why?
Is there any empathy there? I read the 22 page. The thing that you're talking about is referred to in the 22-page thing when they say, owing to the ongoing armed conflict, the rules of international humanitarian law were also in effect and operated as lex specialis during active hostilities. International humanitarian law only permits attacks that comply with the principle of distinction, proportionality, and precaution, but they narrowed when those active hostilities were significantly to what other people or Israel would have had the hostilities counted as. That's the part you're referring to. You think that this is saying they analyzed the whole thing as an armed conflict, but that's not. They only used a very special analysis of that during very particular moments. But you
No,
don't know
you're-
that because you're only reading sentences from the executive summary.
You're projecting. I'm going to read the quote again. IDF conduct also violate international humanitarian law.
It's ISF conduct, but okay.
Yeah, okay. Which wow, what a clarification. Israel security force, which permits civilians to be targeted only when they participate in hostilities. This purposely threat was not met by demonstrators' conduct, with one possible exception. So they analyzed every case. You're wrong. You didn't read, as usual. Low empathy, supporting a massacre. Great job. And supporting the killing of a 14-year-old girl. Yeah.
This guy 100%. I hope I don't think he's at a PhD. I think he's lying. Good luck, LonerBox. Bye.
You want to ban that? PhD.
Do you want me to bring Avi in now, or?
No, I think I'm done with you guys. This is getting boring.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I didn't
All
think
right,
you'd
bye.
ever run out of steam.